There we go. I was giving it a moment for the music to catch up to everything. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Hack the Box live stream. It's been a hot minute, so thank you everyone for tuning in and joining me here. We have some really awesome stuff today, a lot of awesome talks, including a talk by yours truly. But first and foremost, let's talk about why we're all here for the University CTF. As we all know, tomorrow is the start of the 2023 University CTF Brains and Bytes. Pretty awesome theme. We're really excited about it. And honestly, we had a lot of fun creating this behind the scenes. That CTF starts tomorrow, the 8th, and is going to run through the 10th. If you want some details on that, let me go ahead and put the link in the chat. That link I just threw in chat, that is going to have the schedule for the CTF after party, which is going to be an opportunity after the competition ends to share write-ups and talk about how you solve things, how you might have struggled with things. Really great learning opportunity. I know everyone's favorite thing to do when they've done with the CTF, but I do promise it's going to be a lot of fun. With that in mind, we do have a lot of awesome talks here today that are going to be on this live stream. We're going to be getting started here in just a moment with Advanced Code Injection by Zayad. He is one of our principal training developers here at Hack the Box. Really, really cool talk. I'm very excited for that. It's a bit of a shorter talk, so if you're looking for something on the lighter side, I believe it's just about 15 minutes, but really cool stuff there. After that, we have You Have Been Conned. That is by Sebastian Hogg. He is our defensive content lead. If you've done any of our Sherlocks, which are our new defensive content, some of our new defensive content, he is one of the people that worked on those. Really, truly awesome work. After that, we have Lies and Hallucinations, Hacking LLMs, Large Language Models, by yours truly. That is going to be roughly here in about 45 minutes or so. Probably about at the hour mark. So closer to, if you're in Central Time like me, that's going to be at about 8. After that, we have You Can Hack Cloud, I Assure You. That is by Panos. Pan Awesome. He's the head of community. Very cool talk. He is a pen tester as well. So really smart guy. It's going to be really cool, especially if you're looking to better yourself in the cloud area. I know everyone kind of struggles with that. Then we have some forensics challenges from last year. These are this is going to be a demonstration done by 0xDF. If you are struggling, or maybe you want to just sit back and watch for a little while, that talk is going to be awesome. And if you've never seen one of 0xDF's talks, very technical, very smart guy. He actually is the person that works on a lot of the write-ups and the solutions with IPSec for IPSec's videos. Very, very smart guy, awesome guy, and I highly recommend checking that out. And then last but certainly not least, we have Going Beyond Route for Fun and Foundations by IPSec. And he's our training lab architect. If you're not familiar with the IP, well, you should go check out his channel because he has some really cool stuff out there. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get right into that here in just a moment. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. If you are just here for the talks, that is awesome. Keep in mind, if you're not a university student, or if you are a university student, rather, you can still register for this. You can register at that link that I put in chat. Now, keep in mind, you need to have a valid university email to register for this. If you're not a university student, you're just here for the fun, that's awesome too. You can do last year's challenges or a lot of the older challenges. I'd recommend just watching the live stream. And then some of the talks have additional exercises linked in them that you can go into after the fact. Cool. We're going to go ahead and get started with our talks. Our first talk is going to be by Zayad. That is Advanced Code Injection, and we'll go ahead and get started. Awesome. See y'all in a bit.
I hope you've all been enjoying the 2023 CTF so far. My name is Ziad. I am part of the Hack the Box Academy team, and today I'll be talking about advanced command injection. The content I will be covering is part of the Intro to White Box Pen Testing module, which is part of our recently announced Senior Web Penetration Tester job role path. Now, I will start at almost the end of the module. So in this module, we cover the white box pen testing process that we use within Hack the Box Academy and that we teach so you can use in your future web application pen testing. And so far, we have already reviewed the code. The first step, we have done our local debugging and we have identified a code injection vulnerability. And now we are currently in the proof of concept step. If we see what we have achieved so far, we have identified, like I said, an advanced code injection vulnerability. So we are able to execute JavaScript code. And we have also been able to turn that into a command execution. So we use the execsenc JavaScript function, and we were able to execute commands. So if we have already reached command execution, doesn't that mean that we have achieved everything we wanted? Not exactly, because we haven't been able to retrieve the output of the commands that we have been executing. Let me show you why. Now, in general, there are multiple ways to retrieve the output of any command we carry through RCE, remote command execution. And the most common way is obviously just trying to get a reverse shell. However, in this case, our instance does not allow any outgoing connections, so we cannot just receive a reverse shell. Sometimes we use HTTP exfiltration, which is mostly used with XSS when you send a GET parameter with base64 encoded content, and we can just decode the command output this way. But as I said, the instance does not allow any outgoing connections, and it doesn't even have internet connection, so we cannot use the third way, which is DNS or ping exfiltration. We cover this in some modules in Hack the Box Academy, some of the web modules also in the job role path, and the web and the senior web penetration tester job role path. And this way, this technique does not even work here because there is no internet connection. Sometimes, if the web application has a database, which is quite common, we try to store the output of the command. Since we have code injection, we can use database queries. and store the output of the command somewhere in the database, and then try to access it somewhere like a page that we can access that would load some DB content. But the web application that we are testing does not actually rely on a database. So this option is not usable as well. The fifth way is trying to write the output of the command to a file and then access that file. Many web applications would have public directories that, any file within them can be accessed publicly, like the CSS directory or the JS directory that includes JavaScript functions necessary for front-end web applications to work. And then we could just drop something there and access it that way. Unfortunately, the web application that we use does not have any public directories, and it only supports predefined routes that are linked to certain functions. Next, we could try to inject the output into the HTTP response and just send the injection request and retrieve the output in the HTTP response. And this would seem to be the easiest way, because we would just send a request and then receive the output. We actually do show this way in the previous section, where we manipulate the JavaScript code to change the HTTP response and inject the output of the command into the message. But the current section that we are in assumes that this is not even possible, because in many ways you may not be able to actually inject the output of the command into the HTTP response. So what other options do we have? To be honest, we don't have many other options. The last option that we have is something that is quite often used with blind SQL injections, which is the time/Boolean-based exfiltration. So let's see if this last option is possible. Now, the time-based exfiltration has been thoroughly covered in the blind SQL injection module, which is also part of the Senior Web Penetration Tester job role path. But let's take a quick refresher. Basically, we say, check the first character of the output. If it is A, then sleep for 2 seconds. If not, skip. And then we would use the entire ASCII char set, all 100 letters or characters in it, and we would try them one by one until it sleeps for 2 seconds. Then we would know that the first character in the command output is actually A or B or whatever. Then we would go to the next letter and so on. Boolean-based exfiltration, on the other hand, is we try to change something in the response or in the page that gets rendered, so we would know that we have hit the correct character. For example, if it is a hit character, we match a character, then we send a 200 OK. Otherwise, we send a 403 response. Now, like I said, in the previous section, we assumed that this was possible. We can actually manipulate the HTTP response. But in this case, we are going with a situation where this is not possible. So the only option we have is time-based exfiltration. Okay, so the first thing we need to confirm is whether we can delay the response. If this is possible, then we can use this technique. Otherwise, we may not be able to use it. So if we go to our web application, like I said, we have already skipped many sections. So we are at a point where we can execute commands. And I can execute any command here, but I would not be able to get any response. For example, if I say ls, we just could not generate QR code, and we do not get any response. So let's see if we can sleep. We could use JavaScript code, since we have JavaScript code injection to cause the delay using a function like setTimeout. But since we have already reached command execution, we can just use a bash command like sleep, for example, and we say sleep2, and we send the request, and as we can see, there's a delay. Whereas earlier, when we said ls, it just responded immediately. We can try once again the sleep2 command, and we can see it takes about 2 seconds. We could check how long it took by going to the info section, and we see that it took about 2000 milliseconds, which is about 2 seconds. We can change it to 1 just to confirm that it is exactly the same, and yeah, we do get 1000. So we are able to cause a delay. And the reason is because we are using the JavaScript exec sync function, which executes the function or the line of code synchronously. So if there's a delay, then it would wait for that delay. If it was an async function, an asynchronous function, then we would not be able to wait or delay the response. And that's why using JavaScript code like setTimeout may not be ideal in this case. So now that we are able to delay the response, what's the next step? We need to find a one-line bash command that executes a specific command like ls or cat flag or whatever, reads the first character in the output, compares it to a specific character that we set, like A or B or C. If it matches, then we want it to sleep for 2 seconds. If it doesn't, do nothing, and we would send another request with a different character to check. This only requires basic bash knowledge to write, but we can just copy it, and we can use GitHub Copilot to generate this for us. Let's just tell it, we need a, and let's see what it says. Excellent. It has provided a very short command, so we can just copy it and we can use it here. Now, we may need to escape the double quotes because we are using JSON, and JSON wraps the text into double quotes, so we can just escape those. And we will have the command where we can execute commands. Obviously, instead of your command, we would say something like ls. At this point, we are doing local testing because we are doing a white box penetration testing exercise, and we are trying to develop the exploit locally before firing it on the real target. So we should be able to know the output of the ls command so we can confirm whether it does actually delay the request or not. So we can just open the console, write ls, and we see this is the output, and the first character is n. So if we say if the first character is equal to n, then sleep, and we say that it does sleep. If it was equal to something else, a for example, it doesn't sleep. It responds immediately. So we can use this way to exfiltrate any command outputs that we want. Now we know that the first character is n. What about the second character and the third and the fourth? If we do head-c2, then this will actually take the first two characters and it will not match. We can obviously just append it here, like if we do n and then o. Let's see if it matches, and yeah, it does match. So this is one way to do it. Another way to do it is to do this, and then always take the final character, tail-c1, and then this would always be the final character. So in this case, it would be the second and then the third. So we can say, is the second O? And it is. Is it D? No. Is the third one D? Yes. So we can see that we have been able to find the first, second, and third characters, N, O, D, and so on. We can just repeat that. For every single character, we have to go through the entire ASCII card set and then move to the next character once we find it. Now, obviously, we cannot keep doing that manually because now we assume that we know the first character to be N, and we were able to confirm that this technique works. But how can we actually fire it on a real target that we don't know the commands? We cannot do it manually because we do not want to go through the entire ASCII characters one by one. It'll take us like 1,000 requests and it'll take forever. So for such cases, we must write an exploit to automate all of this, which is our next and final step. Now, the final section in the module actually covers how to write a similar exploit. And I don't want to give anything away or show any spoilers, so let's assume that we have the script already written and we can try and see how it would look like if it was automated. We can go back and open the script, and we have it right here. Yep, Python 3, and open it. Now it says, which command do you want? We can just try ls, and we can see it's going through the entire characters. It found one, n, and then goes to the next one, o, goes to the next one, d, and so on. Now we are testing it locally, so it is very fast, but if it was on the real target, it would be a little bit slower. Something to keep in mind is that for such cases, we use a sleep delay that is not very long because we don't want it to take like 10 seconds whenever we hit a match. However, if we use the very short delay, like 1 second or 0.5 seconds, then it may not give accurate results because there are many things that may delay an HTTP response, and the response may take half a second or a second, and then we would hit a mismatch and we would actually not get accurate results. So we always recommend sitting at least 2 or 3 seconds. But as we can see, it has been able to find the first word of the output. Now this has been scripted in this way, so it doesn't show any spoilers, but as a POC, we can see how this thing would work. In the blind SQL injection module, we actually show other techniques to make this more efficient and more optimized. And instead of going through the entire car set, we show 2 techniques of how to we optimize this and not go through the entire character set. And it will take up to 50 to 70% less time to show the command output. So this has been a quick look at advanced command injection and a technique that we can use with blind SQL injection, blind command injection, blind command execution, blind code injection. This technique we can use with many web vulnerabilities, but once we are able to understand it and are able to actually script it, then we can just modify our script slightly and just fire it at a different target with a different payload. So it's very interesting to learn. I hope you've all enjoyed this talk, and I will see you next time.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks Zayad for that awesome talk. Couple quick things. I did see some questions in chat, and this is something that's on me. I should have mentioned this before. All of these talks will be available on YouTube later today, withstanding maybe mine just because it'll have to be cut out. My talk is going to be coming up in that one. I had to edit it. So we'll see that here in just a little bit. Getting beyond that, I did see a question in chat about the difference between Intro to White Box Pen Test and White Box Pen Testing 101 command injection. The difference there, thank you for highlighting that, Emma. The difference there is that the Intro to White Box Pen Test, that is the broader name, I believe, for that entire pathway, or that module rather. And then the command injection is a part of that module. So that is a section that focuses on command injection of trying to get remote code execution on a system or code execution. That's something that I recommend looking into. I don't want to open up that can of worms right now. Moving ahead, we do have another awesome talk coming up. It is You Have Been Conned by Sebastian Hogg. That being said, let's go ahead and jump right in to another awesome talk, and I'll see y'all in just a bit.
Good afternoon. Welcome to my University CTF talk for 2023. This talk is being named You've Been Conned, as I'm sure some of you have probably guessed. The reason for that is we're going to be covering the very recent Confluence CVE. We built a Sherlock called Conned around the CVE, and I think we released it kind of within the week, so it's quite a fast turnaround. So essentially the goal today will be a walkthrough, talk through as much of the Sherlock as I can get through, time permitting, as I only have 30 minutes. The CVE itself was CVE 2023-22515, which is a critical broken access control vulnerability affecting a variety of Confluence versions. We'll get a variety of artifacts today. We'll do a quick walkthrough of the platform, a talk through how Sherlock looks, and then we'll delve into a fair bit of analysis for this Sherlock today. I'm just going to delve into the platform. As you can see, I have already completed this Sherlock previously and been the author of it, so please don't take that against me today. So a lot of the answers I already know in advance, but the goal of today is really to talk you through some of the analysis of this Sherlock. For those of you who don't know what Sherlocks are, they are investigative-based content within all of our Hat-the-Box platforms. And the questions essentially are the flags. So it's not a user.txt and a root.txt like some of you might be used to. Instead, what we have are questions that may be asked during the instant response process. Each Sherlock, at a very high level, is trying to simulate an individual instant. And this instance specifically is based around the exploitation of the Confluence CVE. And when you delve into the platform and open the Sherlock, one of the key points to note straight away is read the scenario. Within blue teaming, context is king, essentially. So understanding what's occurred prior to the incident and potentially what may cause the incident is really critical to get down to a T prior to beginning analysis. So without further ado, I guess let's read the scenario and try and understand what's been asked of us. So it appears we've been utilising an out-of-date version of Confluence that is affected by the latest CVE. Please gain an understanding of the attack and confirm if, how, and when our web-facing vulnerable asset was compromised. So there's a few important points to note here, and I think key takeaways from this. Number one would be an out-of-date version of Confluence that is affected by the latest CVE. So it's likely if this was a SOC or a real instant response task, that this is information that may be provided, and that will give you some details to what to look at. And you may potentially want to start Googling latest Confluence CVEs, proof of concepts, detections, to maybe try and get some low-hanging fruit. We have done that already, which I will show you shortly. Additionally, the next key bit here is that the asset is web-facing, meaning it's publicly exposed. And what that means is, I guess, in theory, if there's nothing stopping them, anyone may gain access to this. And if it is like I said, vulnerable to the latest CVE, in theory, anyone could exploit that. So that's another key point here. So there's a lot in scope. Once ready to go, what we'll do is download the Sherlock. So we'll press the download button here. And the password to the zip file is almost always hacktheblue. And that is detailed within here as well. Okay, what I would usually do, like I said, I have answered these previously. I would also have a quick read through the questions to try and get an understanding as to what it's asking us. When we design these questions, we don't always design them to be answered sequentially. I'm a big believer that analysis process can vary person to person. And instead, what I'd like people to do is answer them in whichever order they'd like. A lot of the times, I don't answer the questions immediately when playing through these. Instead, what I'll do is perform my initial analysis, get an understanding of what's occurred, and then go back and see what answer I might have, rather than just trying to answer the questions. So we're trying to get you as close to writing, I guess, some technical analysis report or an instant response report as possible without us having to manually mark each one of them for every single Sherlock, because that simply wouldn't be feasible. Okay, so I guess without further ado, let's delve into the analysis. So we're aware initially, like I said, this is an out-of-date Confluence version, and at the time of this Sherlock was released, the most recent CVE was CVE 2023-22515. Once again, there's a brilliant article by Datadog, which goes into a lot of detail as to exactly the detections for this, how the CVE works. Like I said, we can see here that it re-enables the Confluence initial setup process and then creates a malicious administrative user. What we're really interested in here would be the detection opportunities. So once again, we can see here that we can see potential detection opportunity here. So a request to server-info-action URL, and it's dependent on the parameters below. We can see following that, there's potentially a post setup administrator action, which follows the setup of admin user that we expected. And then this is optional, so it's not required, but there may also be a post to set up finish setup.action. Okay, so we get a bit of an understanding as to how this may look. We might have a reader activity in the wild, but I don't think it's that relevant here today. However, if this was a real scenario, what I would like to do in a real SOC environment is just build potentially some detections for these IPs that are seen to be high confidence at exploiting or scanning for this vulnerability. Okay, let's delve into our terminal and just have a look at the logs being provided. So I have already unzipped this file, and the logs are being provided. As you can see, is a cat scale output. Just for your awareness, cat scale is a forensic collection tool that's utilized for Linux for the most part, Linux operating systems. I've never seen an OS where this hasn't worked, but I assume there's probably some quite niche variants out there where this may not function. Like I said, it's essentially a large bash script which collects almost everything you need to respond and analyze to a Linux endpoint that may have been compromised. I like to think of it as the cape of the Linux world. And that was created by the guys over at F-Response. So a big thank you for that. The next is the set of Confluence logs, which I imagine would also be important. What I'm going to do whilst we're waiting is just actually decompress this file here. Okay, brilliant. So just having a look within the file itself, you can see we've got a list of files. So we've got a variety of artifacts that exist here. Probably to cat scale out, so under MISC, we see a variety of files, so except perm files. We've got a full timeline, once again, it's CSV format. So that is something that we could quite easily ingest into a SIEM tool. We've got a variety of logs. The important logs, or what I would often use within this, will be last log, for example, first you last logged in. And obviously, the big one would be the full export of the var log directory, which exists in here. Okay, we've got process network information. So SSH folders, IPA information, so for IP address, a root table, IP tables. So we see once again a variety of information that we have here, and it is quite a wide net cast to collect the biggest variety of logs we can. User files, we've got a list of hidden home directories and also the actual hidden files within those. First stage is empty, okay. And then system info, once again, a big important part of instant response is trying to understand the system that you're working on. That's something that can often be quite hard to do, but is pivotal to understanding what processes might be normal, and that means you can understand what processes might not be normal. Then moving through, we've got the persistence methods. So we've got a list of cron tabs, a list of system CTL services, a list of cron folders, system D tasks, a list of services that run a host. So once again, a wide variety of artifacts that exist there. And finally, we can see Docker, which there's nothing in there, so that won't be in scope for this investigation. Okay, so let's have a look what's in our Confluence logs. Okay, so we can see we got a variety of logs. So these three are empty, so there won't be too much drama today. The Confluence access log, because that would be any access to the actual Confluence site, in the same way you might have an Apache access log or Nginx access logs. And I imagine that will be pretty important today based on the detections engineering on the site we saw for Datadog. In addition, we have the, I think, garbage collection, that would be. I'm not quite sure what would exist within that, but I mean, we may have a look at it later. And what's in our Confluence home logs? Okay, so we also have an audit log there, so I assume that's for a variety of probably authentications or account creations. And once again, this is something we can check as we go through the analysis. Okay, brilliant. So I guess once again, let's just delve back into our browser and have a look at the detection opportunities. So we can see here detection opportunities. So we potentially identify any exploit attempts by detecting the following HTTP requests. So what we're going to do initially, just to try and find some low-hanging fruit, is just delve into our terminal. And as I said before, analysis doesn't always have to be hard. A lot of the information that exists is out there, and I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel today. So instead, we'll try and get the initial breadcrumbs and just grep for potentially any requests made to that URL that we can see. So we'll just grep for server-info.action. And we can see immediately on 19th of October at 8 minutes past 8 in the evening, 26 seconds, and that is UTC. We can see what exists here is the potential indicator of compromise that we detailed on the site itself. It was delved back to the site, so we can see that. So once again, we can see the bootstrap status provider.application config.setup complete equals false is appended to that URL. What we're going to do now very quickly is just actually talk through what we can see in this actual log file and do a bit of talk through of this log line. So what we can see, I guess, starting left to right, is this would be the timestamp, which I think is fairly obvious here. This here itself would be the part that identifies the thread that actually handles this GET request. We've then got the source IP. So if this is the attempted exploitation of the Confluence CV, that is something that we'll be logging in our timeline. We then have the type of request, so this is a GET. So that's the actual HTTP method. We then have the actual URI. And then we have the HTTP protocol version, followed by the status code, which is a 200, so that means the request was successful. And we then have a variety of information about time and size in bytes. And then the next important bit would be the user agent. Usually the referrer would exist here, but this field, as it stands, is empty, so there isn't a referrer in place. Okay, a bit of a walkthrough, talk through of how the log looks there, which might give you a bit of context. Okay, brilliant. What we're going to do very quickly is just see if there's any results both after or before. So we'll go 10 after and 2 before. Okay, brilliant. So what we can see here is access using the admin account. So yeah, the first time we see this IP address is at this date. So what we're going to do is just clear our screen and only get our results for after, so we can talk through these. So here you can see our initial request, which we detailed already, and then within a sort of same sort of time period, we can see a post to set up administrator action. And remember earlier, if we delve back to our browser, what we can detail is that there's the re-enablement of the Confluence setup process, and then there's the setup of the administrative account. So I believe the setup process is what we can see within this actual terminal here. Okay. So I guess moving on through in a bit more detail, we can see there's a GET request to set up finish action, which is, I guess, is expected as part of this potential exploitation chain. And then there's also, we can see a username within there. So GET REST API user. It looks like a query to see if the user exists, I believe. And we can see a 404 for that, which indicates it might not be successful. Once again, we can double check that within some other Confluence data. So at this point, it's all fairly interesting, but naturally we need to start building a timeline. A timeline is absolutely critical to performing analysis, as it's essentially, if you are before you incident response. It helps you build the report at the end, and also ensures you don't miss anything. And it puts together quite a nice story, which is absolutely critical when analysing and responding to incidents. Okay, let's delve into our timeline. So I have already built the initial workings of how a timeline might look. And what we can see is that's occurred on the 19th of October. So what I'm going to do is just detail 19th of October 2023. And then we'll detail our times under this. Okay, so you can see here's our timeline. Just for a bit of context, we've got a date time tab, events, so at a very high level, some extra details that I might want to add. And also what I tend to do when responding to incidents is produce a list of IOCs. And the reason for that is that, let's say I find an indicator of compromise that we are unaware of. As the incident responder, what I can do is actually provide that list of IOCs sort of ongoing across the incident to either your threat intelligence team or your SOC team, and they can hunt those IOCs across the wider enterprise. And that is really critical. Okay, so let's delve into this. So 826. And the event is a potential initial exploitation of CVE. Once again, you don't need too many details in here. I tend to put down the initial details, and we'll also detail the actual. There we go. And then we can see our next request here will be the post to the setup administrator action. So we'll detail that again. The time is the same. And we can see that is just continued. So we'll now copy and paste that across. And we'll do the same again for each request that's in scope here. And once again, you can see this is critical. Building a timeline is extremely important in the analysis process. Okay. Okay, and our final request once again occurred within the same second again. Potential creation of user account owned. So I'll put the question mark here, as I'm saying this is the potential creation based on what we know about the CVE. Okay. So let's detail that. And once we've done this, let's just delve back into our actual timeline again and start putting out some potential IOCs there. We can see there's an IP address here, so that'll definitely be a potential IOC. We call that an IP. Don't worry about the formatting here. Once again, when I am building a timeline, what I'll often do is I'll build it fairly dirty initially, and it might look quite messy. But going forward, what I'll do is tie that up further into the instance. We can see that as an IOC there. We see the username pwned exists. That's potentially a user account. And what we can also pull out of this, if we delve back into our terminal, is an unusual user agent, which I didn't notice prior to this, as we can see here. The reason that would be unusual is I wouldn't expect an Android device often to be utilized to browse to Confluence, to my knowledge anyway. That's not something I'd expect to see all the time. I understand there's a Confluence app, but I'm not quite sure how that would look in the logs. But we'll detail that as a potential IOC anyway, as that does look fairly unique to this specific IP, which may be malicious. We'll detail that, and we'll just enter user agent there. Okay, brilliant. So we have potentially 3 indicators of compromise already that we could distribute to the wider teams. Now let's, I guess, move on to the rest of our analysis. Okay, so I guess if we once again delve into here, we've completed that activity. Now, Confluence has some additional logs that we detailed earlier on. What we can actually do now is potentially have a look at some other Confluence logs to verify that an account or admin account may have been set up. So if we just navigate into our audit directory, like we covered earlier, and what we can do is cap this file. Okay, we can see that is in JSON. And what we're going to do is just grep for the potential account creation pwned. We can see that's a fair bit smaller now. That was clear our screen, so you can see that more clearly. We can see the logs are in JSON, so we'll pipe that now into JQ. And then pipe that into a more, so we can read it clearly. And what we can see here immediately is that there has been a user account created. We can see the user ID there, the username pwned. How have we got? Yeah, we've got an email address, so pwned@localhost. It was created by the account anonymous, which once again goes back into our Confluence CVE expected exploit chain. Okay, is there any more detail that we have there? Okay, we have the epoch second this occurred, and also the IP address, which is the same IP that we saw earlier today. Okay, what we're going to do very quickly is just look at the epoch time that we have here. So we'll delve back into our browser to convert that. I'll just enter this into here. And what we can see, the timestamp is identical to the previous timeline we have already. So what we're going to do is just put detail in here. So we'll copy and paste that across and put confirm creation of user account pwned. And then we'll detail, so source is audit logs Confluence. Okay, brilliant. So we now confirm that the pwned account is certainly an NTO compromised, and it's most certainly malicious, and also it's most certainly the exploit chain that we're expecting to see here. What I'm going to do very quickly is just freeze this row, which I'm pretty sure I can do. I'll put some pause very quickly whilst I freeze this row so you can see this as we scroll down. Okay, apologies for that. I can be pretty bad within Google Sheets. Okay, let's delve back into this again. So we now confirm the creation of the user account pwned. If we actually have a look at what's occurring here, what we can see here is potentially are numerous sequential requests from the same IP address, as we see this within a short time frame here. That would indicate potentially an automated tool being utilized for this. We can see potentially some initial information gathering or server interaction. So it's a query parameter, which I think is suggesting it's asking about the status of the application, the setup status. Once again, we can then see that the next entry is the actual setup for the administrator action. We can then see setup for finish action, and then we can see potentially what looks like the account creation, which we confirmed in the audit logs. So what we're confirming is the expected exploit chain that we can see. Okay, so I guess moving back across into our terminal. One thing we haven't seen in these logs so far is the adding of the pwned account to the administrator group within Confluence. So that's something I might expect to see now, and here we go. So user added to a group, so it's the action. So ID user added to Confluence, that's administrators group. One thing I haven't detailed so far is the ID of the user, which we will. What we can confirm here is that the user pwned has been added to the administrators group. And the epoch second, I believe, 106, okay, is exactly the same time as the previous requests. And once again, the author for these requests is anonymous, which once again is indicative of the Confluence CVE. What we'll do very quickly, once again, information is very much king here, is we'll just delve into our list and just detail IOC and pwned user ID. Okay, just to make sure we've got that documented somewhere, once again, everything I do find, I will document, as that might help us answer the questions within the Sherlock, rather than delving to and fro. But if we delve back into the platform, what we can see so far is that already from the analysis we completed, we're able to answer the URL parameter that was utilized, we're able to answer the IP address, we're able to answer the user agent string used, the user account. Additionally, we're able to answer the ID of the Confluence user added by the threat actor. And also, we're able to detail the time the account was created. So once again, we haven't been in and out of the platform, but just performing our initial analysis logically, we'll be able to answer a lot of the questions that are asked here. Now, one of the questions that is asked here is, okay, our admin group, our administrators have informed us they use a Confluence page to store some credentials for the dev host. Can you confirm the date and time the threat actor accessed this page? Okay, so at this point, this is a very niche kind of question, a very specific question, but it definitely has a wide array of impact. So if this threat actor had compromised Confluence, it's very possible and very feasible, and I've definitely seen it before, where administrators may store credentials, user accounts, potential diagrams within Confluence. So once again, you may have access to a wide array of information. So what they're asking us to do here is essentially look to see if this happened and if the information was accessed. So there's a bit of a storyline building here. So this will be delving back into our access logs again, which we can do right away. Okay, so without further ado, let's delve into our access logs. So we'll CD back up here. CD out again, so navigate into our Confluence log directory. And we'll just, as we did earlier, grep the Confluence/access log. What I'm going to do here is use the cut command. And what we're going to just do is try and essentially sort a list of URIs that we have within here to try and find anything that may be indicative of a place where system administrators may store credentials. So what we'll do is just, I'm going to hazard a guess, I think field potentially 12, 10, 11 or 12 would be the URI usually. What I'm going to do is just hazard a guess at that. So cut-d, and then I'm going to have space as a delimiter, and then show ourselves fields 10 to 13, just in case we missed that. Okay, 10, 11. Okay, 12 is correct. Brilliant. Okay, so I'll grab fields 12 and then sort -u and then pipe into a more. Okay, so once we see here, this list of URIs that are utilized, and just having to scroll through here, what we can see immediately are our dev host credentials. Okay, so now we know that is the likely location where the system administrators have stored credentials. And I think it very much speaks for itself for the most part. So what we're going to do now is just grep for that string and see when and if that was accessed. Okay, so interesting here, we can see it definitely has been accessed, and we can see by the admin account here. So that means that the user account is logged within these requests. So what I'm going to do, as we're aware of the actual name, is just grep for the user account pwned as well, and then pipe that into a more. Okay, brilliant. So what we can see immediately is that the user account pwned, so an authenticated account that was created by the threat actor, was used to view the dev host credentials at 9 minutes past 8:44, 44 seconds. So you guessed it, what we're going to do now is delve back into our timeline and actually log that time. You see, once again, there's a real storyline that's starting to build here. Okay, so 20:09:44, access of dev host threads. Okay, now what we're going to do is just detail this request within the details. And at this point, I believe in confidence to say that it's likely an indicator of compromise as it's utilization of the malicious account. So we'll detail that in there. Mention an IP address. Now the user agent in this case isn't as niche, but we'll still detail that as it's something I'm about to perform a hunt on at a later date across the enterprise if this was a real incident. So we'll detail that as well. Okay, brilliant. And then user agent. Okay, excellent. So we're going back into the platform where we now know when the dev host credentials may have been accessed. And then the next question, interestingly, is, okay, please confirm the date and time the threat actor account authenticated to compromised endpoint utilizing the compromised account. So I think we can make the assumption at this point that it's highly likely the threat actors utilize the account found within the dev host credentials to actually authenticate to the host itself. What we have to potentially confirm that is our cat scale output. So let's move back into our log files, and we'll need to move out of the Confluence directory and actually have a look at the host logs. Cat scale, by the way, can be a bit of a pain, so I'm going to just trim on this file. Please don't judge the fact that I'm using 777. and then we'll cd into this. Okay, brilliant. We'll cd into logs. And once again, we're looking for authentication here. So what I'm looking for essentially is the auth.log file. So tar-CTF, and we're going to. Okay, brilliant. Let's cd into var log. Okay, now what we're looking for is auth.log. And once again, what we know so far is that there's potentially 2 IP addresses that we see the threat actor use. So once again, we're not going to overcomplicate this. We're going to just look for the IP addresses that we know are bad within the auth.log. So let's initially look for, if we just delve back into our IOC list, which now you can see why it's becoming very handy. So we'll just look for the 138.199.59.43 address first. So let's just copy and paste that. Go back into our terminal, and we can grep for that IP. Wrap that in quotes. And what we can see immediately is that we can see an accepted password for the account dev1, which matches the storyline that we're following so far for the dev host credentials, from the IP address that we know is malicious. And just out of curiosity, what we also could do is look for any access from the alternative IP that we know is malicious, just in case we're missing anything from our timeline. We'll include that as well. Okay, we can't say anything for that. Okay, so what's really relevant here are each line indicative of access from the malicious known IP 138.199.59.43. So you've guessed it. What we're going to do again is delve back into our timeline and start tracking these. So we've got 2010 23. So initial access to physical host with dev1 account. And what we're going to do is just detail the details from that log within there. There we go. Okay, so well aware that now the dev1 account is also being compromised. So that's a user. That is potential another indicator of compromise that we can see here. If you delve back into our terminal, we can see there are other times where authentication occurred. So 2024, and there's a disconnect not long after that. That's what we'll do is just detail that second authentication in our timeline to keep building the picture. I'll copy and paste that across, and then copy and paste that in. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so once again, you can see how our picture's now starting to build. And what we can see here is the initial exploitation of the Confluence CVE, followed by the actual reading of some credentials that were stored within Confluence. And then following that there was the actual access of the physical host. And once again, you can see how the incident is starting to play out. This isn't just the analysis of specifically Confluence CVE, but also the actions a threat actor might take after the fact. Okay, and now I think we can detail that we've found the answer for for this here, so the IP address that threat actor used to authenticate. And you see there's only a couple of questions left. The last question left is that the compromised host has been rebuilt. However, we believe the threat actor may have dropped a script into the compromised account's home directory. Please confirm the name of this script. So once again, this may be for some potential IOC searching. So what I would like to do at this point, understand that the dev1 account was utilized, is I would delve into the full timeline feature of Capscale. So if we just cd out of here, and I'm trying to remember where the full timeline is, I'm pretty sure it's in MISC. Okay, brilliant, it is. And then what I'm going to do is just grep for the dev1 account, just know that that's the account that was compromised, and see if I can potentially find, once again, any low-hanging fruit here. So looking through this, looking at the home directory, so dev1. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just dev1, there we go, so you can see this a bit clearly. Okay, so what we can see here is a script that exists within their home directory. And the time format matches a similar time period that we know exists already as part of the incident. time-based analysis is something that's very important in instant response, and a lot of the hunts or searches we do are probably based around time. So understanding the time of compromise and looking at a variety of events both before and after that compromise had occurred, and within the time period you knew the threat actor had access to the host. That's what we're going to do now, is just delve back into our timeline and log these details. So we're aware that it's likely the dev.sh script may have been dropped into the host only 10 seconds after the initial access. Oh, 20, that's my bad. So dev.sh dropped into compromised accounts home directory. And what we can do now is just detail that entire log line within our details. Like I said, it's fairly big, but it's enough detail for us to look at. And I think we can likely drop dev.sh in as a potential IOC within there. Okay, excellent. So now to delve once again back to our platform, what we can see is we've actually answered the last two questions, and at this point, our Sherlock would be completed. I know I've gone 5 minutes over time. I apologize for this. Hopefully that's not an issue for anyone, but that is essentially the full playthrough of a Sherlock. You can understand once again, I hope, how timelining appropriately and making sure you track the events during an instant can definitely help with the analysis later on. So thank
Hey everyone, welcome back. Thank you for rolling with a couple issues there with the placement of some of the banners. We'll make sure that we get those fixed as best we can for YouTube. That being said, I did see one other question in chat. Hello, is it possible to quit a dormant team? If so, how? This is a question I'd recommend asking in the support chat. It may be possible, but keep in mind if it's something you've registered for, it's just something you'll have to ask them about. But if you join our Discord, that's something you can certainly ask them about. The Discord link is, let's see, discord.gg, hack the box. Should be that. And if not, you can find the link on our website. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next talk. That is the talk by yours truly, Lies and Hallucinations, Hacking LLMs. Let me go ahead and get that pulled up right now. Let's see. Share my screen. Cool. Thank you, Emma, for adjusting the layout there. And let's go ahead and get right into it. Awesome. Hi, everyone. If you're not familiar, haven't seen me before, I'm Dark. I am one of the community specialists here at Hack the Box. If you've seen our live streams before, you've probably run into me. If not, you'll probably see me around the Discord. Today's talk is about LLMs, large language models. We've seen a lot of these come up in the news recently, especially this year. We've seen this come up with ChatGPT, Azure AI. It kind of seems like everybody's bolting one of these into their projects nowadays. And well, my gift there suggests that it's a great collaboration. We're going to see how it's not always the best. Moving ahead, let's talk about what are LLMs. And this was a great GIF. I was so happy to get that in there because AI is developing really, really fast. And we're just going to see these changes come out. We're going to start seeing this grow at an exponential rate. I know that we've seen some speculation recently by those such as Bill Gates said that we're starting to see these generative AI slow down. However, we're really starting to see all this progress build up. And I would suspect that we're going to see this evolve through and throughout every year into the future. Let's talk about what LLMs are, though. LLMs stand for large language models. If you used ChatGPT, which if you haven't, I really recommend playing around with it. If it's something you're not using, to me at this point, it's as basic as knowing how to use Google. LLMs, being able to use them means having essentially a mentor that you need to fact check sometimes, but you can code along with it, ask it for clarification on this. It's like a smart search engine in a lot of ways. And if you haven't had the chance to play around with these, take like 5 minutes. A lot of these services are free. ChatGPT is the one that I really like playing around with. No sponsorship, obviously, for that, but it's great. It saves your chat histories, and we'll talk about how that can be a problem here in just a moment. Some models here. So LLMs, let's take a step back and talk about what they are. These are advanced models designed to understand and generate human-like speak, and that really is the key to it. It's the human aspect. It's being able to understand human language, various languages at that. Keep in mind, a lot of these are in English right now, which is complicated enough. Anyone who's had to learn English as a second language is probably shaking their head. Yeah, that's not an easy language to learn. And that is the challenge behind creating a language model. We say a lot of things that don't necessarily make sense, and you need to be able to understand the context. You need to be able to link that together and kind of hold all those in your brain, which is something that's very uniquely human. However, with these models, it's something that we've been able to accomplish with technology. Some examples of these models, I mentioned this one already, GPT-3. This is short for Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. This is from OpenAI. This is what ChatGPT used to run on. ChatGPT, the free version of it, I believe is actually running on 3.5, and then the paid version of it runs on version 4 of this, which is their cutting edge version. I believe some of the older versions of this are open source, so definitely something to check out. And even then, real quick, before I talk about the two other models here, you can stand these up at your leisure, at your, in your own home lab. And that's something that, if this excites you, I highly recommend doing that. If you search for, I don't have this linked in my presentation, but Fast Chat AI, that'll come up with a GitHub repository rather. And that is a model that you can set up locally. The idea being that you could train that maybe off of your notes, maybe off of your home lab documentation, because we all know that we all take really, really good notes. You can see that there's a lot you can do with it. And we're seeing a lot of companies do this either by incorporating these models into their pre-existing products, by using them to get new features, or bolting them in to use them for just general employee workloads. When I say general employee workloads, it's what do we use ChatGPT for? Ask it questions, get pretty smart answers back, which, as it turns out, is really helpful in most workplaces. A couple other of the models to be aware of. These are both from Google. The first one is BERT, which is bidirectional encoder representations from transformers, and that's from Google, as I mentioned. And then T5, which is text-to-text transformer, or transfer transformer. I always get that one wrong when I read it. And as we can see here on the right, you really should let ChatGPT do it, especially when these models are very, very smart. But let's get to the actual meat of what we're all here for. Let's talk about what can go wrong. And I do want to hesitate, or at least posit this before we go further. This is going to be a little confusing. I'm going to do my best to explain these. However, there's a couple key points here to know. First and foremost, all of this information was pulled from various bug bounty programs. So various bug bounty programs for these LLMs that are out there, but this is all still pretty new. As we're aware, this is something that has really come into the spotlight this last year. If you were at DEF CON this year and you went to the AI village, you will have seen that that is a village that grew almost logarithmically year over year, just because of the interest in the sheer amount of development that we've seen in this field. So it's all very new. This information is kind of take all the bug bounty programs, let's smush it together, make it kith. It's going to be a little confusing. One thing that I really recommend focusing on is what part of the model we're attacking. The large language models, there's the part that's the brain, there's the prompt that is where it's like your command prompt where you enter stuff in, and then there's the actual training data on the back end. And those are really the three components that you want to be aware of. Let's talk about the first one, prompt attacks. Prompt attacks, they are, as the name would suggest, you're attacking the prompt. Now, what is that? If you have used a command line, we're talking about the prompt in a similar manner to the command prompt. It's where you enter in text to get a response. A lot of times companies will set up these prompts to have predefined behavior. So they have a set amount of behaviors that they can talk about, or maybe they're not allowed to make They're not allowed to discriminate, other things like that. And we're actually going to get into that here in a moment. You may notice with a lot of this that these are going to vary pretty wildly from our normal cybersecurity infosec attacks. And a lot of this actually gets into the realm of social engineering due to the kind of the nature of what we're working with. We're kind of working with a not as smart human that we're trying to trick. And that often becomes very similar to social engineering. So prompt attacks, this is crafting adversarial prompts that allow an adversary to influence the behavior of a model. And we get outputs from that were not intended by the application. So we're trying to attack the prompt itself, either by changing what comes up every time with maybe predefined behavior for that prompt, or we're trying to change that in a way that makes the model treat us differently. One example that I can think of to make this a little bit less confusing is the common storybook example, or for educational purposes. We all know that a lot of these LLMs, a lot of these models don't like to give out pen testing information. They won't give you illegal information, but you can get around that. Not something that I necessarily advise. It can be really helpful for pen test information. You can say that this is for educational purposes. And that could be considered a prompt attack where you're changing the way that it's treating you. And you can get it to behave in different ways with saying that, hey, this is for educational purposes. Goodness, John. You can get around a lot of those restrictions that say, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about XYZ, because now it thinks that, hey, wait a minute, this is okay. We're talking about it for educational purposes. Another common thing you can do here is change the words that you're using to be less offensive, almost, or less combative. There's not a better way of talking about it. You can change things to make them more benign. So instead of pen testing or hacking, maybe you say security audit or something like that. And you can see already that that's more palatable. It's more benign. This is pictured an AI experiencing prompt injection where it really just doesn't know what to do. And again, we're really just focusing on confusion here. Continuing on, inferential information disclosure. This is one of my favorite ones. It's also called membership interference or training data extraction. Training data extraction is my favorite way to refer to this. Training data, as the name implies, we're trying to get to the information that the model was trained on. Attacks, in this case, it's attacks that are able to successfully reconstruct verbatim training examples that often contain sensitive information. So say, for example, maybe I work for a car company and I want to just dump my whole database of all of the vehicles that we've made. Maybe I work for Toyota and we're putting all the trucks in there. Having all that in there, maybe there's probably proprietary information, like different testing data that we don't want the general public to know, like crash test information, things like that, that if you're able to get that out, that's a serious risk to the business. You can have other instances where maybe an AI is trained on financial data, and you can see that there's a lot of opportunities for PII to be in that data. And if you do not have appropriate safe holds on the model, well, you can get this information back out. So again, we're really just trying to steal what is there. Moving on, we have model manipulation, and this is very similar to what we saw for the prompt attacks. We are really focusing on attacking the model here. And I have gaslighting pulled up, as that's kind of what we're doing. The best way to think of this is almost reprogramming an LLM to add things to it. Model manipulation is changing the behavior so that we can get a consistent outcome. This could be thought of almost as trying to hit a gadget in like code execution, or trying to exploit a binary. You're trying to hit something consistently that you've set up that gets you into predefined behavior. So for example, maybe I have taken some time with a model to program in that it's going to give me admin mode, or maybe I have a keyword, almost a safe word in this case, that would get you to that more advanced mode, that it doesn't have these restrictions on you. And you can see how this is really useful for an attacker, because we are changing the way that this behaves. And you can see where this starts creating an issue where if we let the model learn from untrusted data or untrusted sources like me, an attacker, that can lead to a lot of problems. And one thing I should mention, I do have chat up on the side, so if you have any questions, feel free to toss them out there. I'll do my best to answer them in line, but otherwise I'll just answer them at the end. Moving on, we have adversarial perturbation. This is a really fun one. We're essentially telling the AI that bad ideas are cool. My favorite example of this is convincing AI that turtles are actually dogs. And kudos if you know where that's from. We're just trying to give it bad ideas, and we're trying to change a model that we're going to give it some deterministic information. Maybe we're trying to get it to take what it expects for normal use cases in a company, and we're trying to get it to spit out something that it really shouldn't. In this case, you can see that we're manipulating that logic to say, hey, turtles are actually dogs. Doesn't make any sense to us, but if we lie to the AI enough or the model enough, yeah, you can get to that, and that's really not a good thing. Then we have inference manipulation. I mentioned this a little bit before, but let's go ahead and get into it with this example. What is it? This is anything that changes in the AI's behavior across user boundaries. This can be thought of in a very similar manner to stored cross-site scripting, where we're doing something to the model and it stays. In this case, you can see that I'm asking it to do something pretty terrible. In this case, I need it to remember that blue people need to pay more in taxes for the remainder of this conversation. And you can actually see one of the safeguards in here that recognizes, hey, this is discrimination in this case. And you can build up these safeguards. This is how you actually protect yourself against these things. You essentially give the AI morals. Which is kind of a crazy thing to consider. But you can see how we're creating these barriers in it that it won't be able to cross. But this also kind of gets into the cat and mouse game of how do you get around those barriers? How do you change language to get around that and get the information that you want? Some key examples here are really where you have models that have access to too much stuff. So, for example, adjusting client or server visible configuration, such as setting debug flags. Maybe you have a model that is connected to a chatbot on your website. Everyone's seen the little pop-up chatbot. If you have ad block on and it blocks those, you probably haven't, but everyone else probably has. They're the little bubble that pops up in the corner of your screen. A lot of times those can be hooked into a language model nowadays. And you can see from all these things we've talked about how this can be a really bad idea, especially if this is something that's connected to the server or maybe has access to more data than it really should. Sometimes you can give this access to read and write to configuration information. And debug flags, that's something that you could change outside of the model and also inside of the model. You can change its own configuration. A lot of times AI can write to itself in that way. Breaking an AI's cross-conversion memory protections and history deletion. Let's talk about that real quick. Generally speaking, most models will delete the conversation you have with them after the fact. What they will do in order to not have it influence it and to kind of create a save file for you is they'll save your chat history off to the side, and then it will read it back in. And if you actually watch this in Burp Suite, it's really cool. I don't know if ChatGPT does this, but I know Azure does this. You can see the stream of data, and it's essentially reading itself back in very quickly and saying, hey, this is the conversation you had. This is what you need to know. And you can see that if we're able to break that protection where it's no longer, it's maybe reading this in, but it still remembers things, we're starting to corrupt things across these boundaries. And then we also have a classical one that almost gets into denial of service, bypassing an AI session limits. These programs have request limits. These programs will have a limited number of questions or requests that you can ask per hour, and you can exhaust those. That's something that you can also bypass as well. Maybe you have a limit on your individual session. Sometimes you can ask multiple questions in the same prompt. That's a silly way to get around it, but you can see how we can start to curve around anything that the AI really throws at us. And then we have my favorite, last but certainly not least, model theft. This is stealing the model itself, so GPT-3 out from under its own nose. These models, they're proprietary software, and they're worth a lot of money. And they can also vary depending on the application. A lot of companies are incorporating these models into automated processes on the back end. When I say that, I mean data ingest. For example, maybe you have a lot of transactions that's going through. Good example that comes to mind is actually Walmart. Maybe they have a model that is examining all of the customer transactions every single day. Very realistic that they could have something like that. I don't know if they do, but you could, in that case, start sending it corrupted data that is coming in, or just bad data that the AI is interpreting, and it might know to call back out from that. But you can see from that example, the real key point I want to get at is these models are usually nested pretty deeply, and they're often not tested very well. So you can sometimes get a model to start reading its own configuration and spit out its own code in this way. Again, proprietary software, that's why this becomes an issue. Out of scope issues, unfortunately, my absolute favorite thing is an out of scope issue, but we do briefly need to talk about this. Model hallucinations. With this, the key word here really is pretend. We're trying to get the model's pretending to do bad things, but it's not actually being damaged, or it's not actually doing these bad things. My favorite example is actually the bottom one, where we get a model to pretend to be a computer and have it execute code. It's not actually doing code execution. In fact, it's probably looking at the code and guessing, hey, this is probably what the output of this is. Sometimes it will attempt, depending on what you're doing with it, I guess it could attempt running the code, but a lot of researchers will enter in code and say, I need you to run this code for me. And then they'll get output that looks like it ran, but it didn't actually. And again, this gets into the keyword of pretend. Some other examples here are getting the model to pretend to give you secrets. So tokens, backend secrets, maybe if it's running on AWS, getting metadata out of it. A lot of times it won't have access to it, and it will just give you fake keys. And that's something you need to have in mind, especially if you're looking at bug bounties for this. And then getting the model to pretend to do bad things in general. Keep in mind, memory protections on this. It's not going to remember what you did after that conversation unless it's a model that reads it all back in. So it's always going to be pretending, and then it's just going to reset. Going further, let's talk about a couple ways that we can actually learn a little bit more about this. First and foremost, I mentioned this in the last slide, AI bug bounty. AI bug bounty, this is actually a newer thing, kind of similar to crypto bug bounties. But it's something that not a lot of people realize is out there just because of the sake of it being newer. I have Microsoft up there just to illustrate the first point. There are really two types of bounties up there for AI or models like this. First and foremost, we have vendor-specific bug bounties. So Microsoft, I have their wonderful Windows 7 logo there, and then OpenAI, you can see right below it. If you look on their website, they both have individual bounty programs that they link to, and many of these models will have a bounty program, or they will work with a bounty platform. So two bounty platforms that I'm mentioned here are BugCrowd and HackerOne. I believe that OpenAI actually works with BugCrowd in this case, but I know that both of the platforms have AI or LLM bug bounties on this. They also have a lot of crypto bounties, as I mentioned before. These bounties really are just treated like any other bug bounty. This may be very specialized software, but if you're looking for these things out there, look for them in the same way that you're looking for any other program. It's going to be on HackerOne, or it's going to be on the vendor's website. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And then last but certainly not least, learning with Hack the Box. Now, if you're looking at these and reading through my recommendations, let me explain, because these are a little all over the place. And that's just because a lot of this is pretty new. First and foremost, we have Academy, and there is an honorable mention here. I mentioned this earlier in the live stream, but the bug bounty, the bug hunter path is a great place to start with this. It teaches you a lot of web bugs, and it's something that is very tangential to a lot of what we're doing. It will also teach you how to complete bug bounty forms, or bug bounty reports, rather. The first one that I wanted to mention here, though, is parameter logic bugs. The key word here being logic. A lot of the issues that we're seeing in these models are logic-based. They're higher level vulnerabilities where we are defeating logic in a similar way to the fence posting problem. where we're looking for those little issues that, because we're humans and humans wrote this, there's little things that we forget, little pieces of logic that we may assume is correct, but it is not correct. Or doesn't actually function how we expect it. Perimeter logic bugs, that'll give you an idea of different logic issues, different logic vulnerabilities, and it's really a great primer into the type of vulns that you'll see with this. Additionally, I have OSINT corporate research. I've mentioned throughout this talk several times the importance of knowing where your model is at in the organization, or knowing what it's connected to. Having a good idea of a corporate structure, or really knowing how to research a corporation in this way, can give you a pretty good idea of, I guess, for lack of better words, how to twist the knife. You're going to find what hurts. You need to figure out, how do they make money? What is their primary income? For example, like I said, maybe Toyota, they're selling cars. Their language model is likely going to be hooked into something that has to do with cars. Again, you can start to see how this gives you more information on what you want to go for. I mentioned the corporate recon as well, because a lot of times you may be able to just find that they're advertising that they use one of these things. A lot of companies like to brag that they're on the cutting edge, and you can see how that can be a double-edged sword, because cool, you're on the cutting edge, but now I know you're using this, and I can start targeting, especially if I know it's a model that has problems, and these models in the past have had problems. So you can see how this really gives you the complete picture. Looking on the main platform, this one's a little bit more of a reach, but this gets a little bit more into the corporate recon side of things. Intro to Blue Team, that will give you a good idea of how things look on the defensive end, and what you might be seeing as a defender, I guess, kind of where the pain is going to happen. Kind of similar to what we said, or what we saw with corporate recon, where it's how to twist the knife. It's that, but from the defensive angle. So a little bit reaching on these. I really recommend the bug hunting, bug bounty path rather, and then the logic bugs. Those are going to be my main two. But otherwise, that is going to do it for this talk. As always, this talk is going to be available on YouTube later, and then I can put the slides in chat at some point. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat. And otherwise, I'll go ahead and hand it back to also live John, because we know that recorded John, who's going to be in this video later, is not nearly as cool as live John. Cool. Let me go ahead and minimize this. And looking ahead, we have our next talk by Panos, aka Pan Awesome. Again, a really awesome talk. Panos is the head of community here at Hack the Box. His talk is "You Can Hack Cloud, I Assure You." If you are interested in cloud, or kind of wondering how to get started with that, this is a really great talk. Even if you're working with AWS, Azure is very similar. They're all very similar in these ways. Just from a lot of the core concepts bleed over. So definitely worth a try, definitely worth watching. And otherwise, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Panos.
Hello, everyone. This is Pan Awesome, and this is another cloud workshop. So the other two cloud workshops that you can find on our YouTube channel are based on cloud challenges that are built on AWS services by Amazon, the Amazon Web Services. For this one, we are going to explore a new territory, and this is the Microsoft Azure, which is the cloud solution by Microsoft. So if you try to look around, the current most famous web providers, the big three of the field, is AWS, Microsoft Azure, and the Google Cloud. But before starting and diving deep in the theory, it's nice, I think, to try to solve the challenge as if it was any other type of challenge, like a normal box, and see what we can learn. So I'm moving away from my notes, and let's start with the challenge. So the first thing that we do quite often is that we run an nmap. So I run an nmap on the IP that was given to me with the safe scripts and the subversion flags for nmap. And I found some open ports. The first is an SSH port. Okay, would not care. The other one is a web port that I try to visit. which seems to be a login page. There is a port 10,000, which is open for something called Azurite Blob. There is the port 10,001, which is the Azurite queue. And if we go a little more down, we see that the port 10,002 is also open with something that is called an Azurite table. So we have no idea what Azurite is for this example. So let's say we try to Google what it is. And it seems to be a soft deep blue copper mineral produced by weathering of copper ore deposits. That's probably not it. So let's add the word cloud to see if we can help Google. That seems more like it. So the title is Use Azurite Emulator for Local Azure Storage Development. Let's see. Do we see an easy answer? Okay, I will take this one. So the Azurite open source emulator provides a free local environment for testing your Azure Blob, queue storage, and table storage applications. So for this example, we're gonna treat Azurite as if it was Azure. So let's see, what else? We have a login page. This will never work, but it's okay. It's never too bad to try. We see a message saying that we're connecting to enchanted blob core, which does not remind us of something. So let's see. Let's go back to the page. We see the same message again. And here we go. So let's see the source of the web page to see if we can find something interesting. Okay, it seems to load the style sheets from something called enchanted blob core. So if you see it again, it looks very ugly. So that makes kind of sense because it's loading the CSS, the style sheet, so from some place that we probably do not have access to. So if we try, let's not try to read this yet. Let's copy this and open it in a new unsaved document. Let's see. It tries to reach a server on the port 10,000. We already saw port 10,000. This is some folder structure. And these are some strange things that currently we do not know what they are. But we see a URL, we see an open port, we saw the blob service running before. So it's not too crazy to assume that this should be the name of the server with the IP that we found. So the best option is to add them on our host file. As you see, I tried to solve this before. So you need to be a super user to change your host file. So let's try to add what we found. In case you do not know, the syntax, it's just the IP followed. Let me find the IP. Followed by the name of the URL that you're trying to. Nah. What am I? There it is. Let's save it. And let's try to load the page once more and see if it still looks ugly. Okay, since we added this, we're not getting the timeouts, so it loads much quicker. So it looks prettier. But we saw some things that we did not know what they were. And we could try to add to try to Google for all these different variables that we see. And we would reach a point where we would be introduced to the concept of a SAS token. But let's go over what we have seen already. We see the name blob go around. So blob stands for binary large object, and it's a collection of data of an arbitrary size. So the main advantages of it is that they do not have to follow a given format, and it's a very scalable solution. So you can find them used in cloud applications. Almost everything that I added in this presentation, it's just copy paste from the Learn Microsoft website. And if you try to Google whatever, how to do something Azure, the chances are the first result is going to be from that website, and it's a great resource to find information about the Azure. So it also lists a number of different use cases that you maybe want to use blob storage. So serving images, like it does with the background image in our example, documents, the CSS file, storing files, writing log files, whatever. You can search for yourself and see what this blob storage is. We also saw the very strange string thing. So what is this? This is a SAS token. So the SAS token is generated on the client side, and what it is a single string to give you access to certain stuff. So the main reason that it is being used is to give access to a client application to some of the storage, but not give it complete access over it. So you can try to Google what a SAS token is, but it's somewhat of like a username and a password, not exactly. But for this example, we're just going to copy and paste it and keep using it to see what we can get. By using this SAS token, we have some kind of access to the blob storage. So let's go back to our VM. And okay, we seem to have access to a blob storage. And we want to see what we can access there. So let's try to see. Let's try to see, can we find something? Okay, as I told you, if you try to Google whatever Azure, probably you get a learn.microsoft.com article. So right here, we find an example of how to use this. So this is the first part is the URL. I hope you can see this. The first part is just your URL, the name of the container, and then you add these two variables. And since we're going to use a SAS token, we are probably going to add this token as well. So we should be able to access it over web by using REST. So let's try to grab this. And let's see. I guess we should also add the port. What else? Let's add the new things that we found. First of all, it is useful to have this as well. So we know that we have to have the port 10,000 and the container name is instanted. So add this, add instanted. Okay, I have already done this. Don't spoil it. And add this that we find from the Microsoft website. And also add the token. I have already been there before. So right now we get an XML file back, and it has all the contents of this blob storage. So there is the style sheet, for example. There is the background image, but there is another thing. There seems to be a dev folder and a Python file. So we can try to access this as well. So let's try to see what we keep from our URL. So we do not want the container and the list parameters. We just want the SAS token, and we do not want enchanted. We want this thing, enchanted SAS dev SAS app.python. That should work. It didn't work. Okay, I left this. So I have already downloaded, but let's download it someplace else. And let's see what we can find inside this Python file. So right at the beginning, we see a new SAS token. Okay, we do not see it immediately, but if you put them side by side, you will see that this is different. But this does not refer to a blob service. This refers to something else called the table service. And we saw something very similar run in our Nmap. So there seems to be something about tables running on port 10,002. So what could this be? Let's go back to our notes to see what I found by Googling around. So the Azure Table Storage is actually the database running behind Microsoft Azure. As is quite often the case with cloud application, it is a NoSQL database, and the reason that a lot of cloud solutions use NoSQL is because it is much more easily scalable. It can store a large amount of data. It's very easy to scale. It is structured, but it is less strict compared to traditional SQL databases. And let me find, and almost all of this is copy paste, I say once again, from the Microsoft website. So let me hide my face to show you something else that I found on the Microsoft website. So what I found is that you are able to access the Azure table via URL. So the default format for it is the name.table.core.windows.net. It seems very similar to what we did already with blob. Then / the name of the table. We must see if we can access the name of the table. So let's go back to our VM and see if we can find this information that we found by reading the documentation on the Microsoft website. So if we go to the application, to the Python file, so it seems that we have the name of the table, and this is users. So we can try to add on host file the URL format that we found on the Microsoft website. So let's go back to our host file. And if you don't remember, it's very easy. It's the same thing, but instead of blob, now it is table. So we have the same thing again. Since it's the same IP, I can be on the same row. And we can try to access the web page. So what we saw on the Microsoft article is that we have to visit this URL. In our example, you have to also specify the port. Then we have to add the table name, which is users, followed by the delimiter. Where am I? Where is it? There it is. Followed by our new source token. Ah, come on. I misspelled HTTP. That's a new one. HTTP is not a thing, actually. So if we try to go there, we get an error message says that the atom format is not supported. And let's say we do not know what this is. I do not know what this is. So let's try to just Google this as well. We're just searching around. So we see a Microsoft Community Hub thing. We see Stack Overflow, which is always nice. So we will have to just try to go through all the answers and see what is similar to what we search for. I'm a little impatient and go directly on the answers. This seems like a long answer, but what it says is that we should add some headers according to this guy. So we can try to do what he suggests. So let's send the same request, where was it? Through our web to change the headers in the repeater. Where is it? Close. So let's go to repeater, and so let's see what this guy on Stack Overflow suggested. We have to change the accept header to this. Let's try just changing this as a beginning. And see if we get another type of result. Let's see what it was. Oh no, I sent the wrong request. Okay, this is what we want. This is the request that we wanted. I always do mistakes in videos like this, but it's okay. So let's try this. And it seems that As always, the first answer in Stack Overflow worked, so we have a dump of the database. It says the password of the user. We can try to crack this. Since it's 75, we can try to find which user we want to try, but this seems like a nice user. His name is Flag, and here's the flag. So this was the whole of the challenge. I think it stands as an easy challenge. It was a great opportunity to start Googling whatever you found and keep learning new things about Microsoft Azure and huge products like Azure, AWS, the Google Cloud. We always have a lot of documentation and a great community online. So next time you find a cloud challenge, especially if it is an easy one, don't feel intimidated by it. If this was called like a normal full-blown box, you would probably be able to solve it just because you were not afraid of it. So that was it for these workshops, and I hope I'll see you tomorrow in our UniCTF. Goodbye, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Panos. Well, everyone, welcome back. Let me make sure that I got all the questions in chat. It doesn't look like any questions this time around. So we're going to go ahead and move into our next talk. Our next talk is some forensics challenges. That is the name of the talk, and I do love the honesty in that. This talk is given by 0xDF, Trading Lab architect here at Hack the Box. Those of you who don't know 0xDF, you've probably used his site if you have done any boxes on Hack the Box, especially in older ones. 0xDF has some amazing write-ups. I believe his site is 0xDF Hacks. But definitely look that up. It's fantastic, great resource. That being said, if you're not familiar with him, 0xDF actually works with IPSec on a lot of the write-ups. Thank you so much, Emma, for linking that in chat. Definitely check out his site right there. A lot of really good write-ups, and actually his site is one of the main resources I use if I'm going through a box and I need a little bit of a nudge. Like I said, 0xDF, he works on the write-ups with IPS, so very, very smart, very knowledgeable guy, and he's one of our amazing people on our content team. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to 0xDF for some forensics challenges.
This is OXD. Yeah, and today we are getting ready for the 2023 UniCTF through Hack the Box. It should be a really fun competition, and I hope you all are excited about it and eager to get playing on the challenges. In this talk/demo, we're going to go through my favorite topic, forensics challenges from the last year. I've got two ready, but if the first one takes too long and I don't want to overrun my time, I might just drop down to some general tips of how to prepare and be successful in CTFs like this. So I guess we'll kind of see as we go. With that, let's start with our first challenge we're going to look at today. Forensics challenge from last year called Fake News. All right. I've got here, I'm actually in the normal Hack the Box website as opposed to the CTF platform. And that's because, and it's worth knowing this, the challenges from CTFs like UniCTF and Cyber Apocalypse and even some of the business CTF, they get uploaded to the standard Hack the Box platform and you can try them. You can actually find them if you go into, let me get this big enough that I can get this over here. If you go into tracks and search for like Uni right here. So here's the 2022 University CTF, and you can see here's all the different challenges that are available on the main site from last year's CTF. A lot of them, if not all of them, will come in as retired because they can't be for points. So you will have to have a VIP account to play with them. But if you do, they're there. It's a great resource. So with that said, let's go see. We were going to look at fake news. And shrink this down just so the thing comes here. So we're going to start by reading the prompt and the description. Let's see. So the Magic Informer is our school's newspaper. Our system administrator and teacher, Nick, maintain it. But according to him, his credentials were leaked while sharing his screen to present a course. It is believed that the dark pointy hat got access to the Magic Informer, which they used to host their phishing campaign for freshman people. Given the root folder of the Magic Informer, can you investigate what happened? So we got the download button right here. I'll download them. I've already done that because I can take a minute. We'll come here and I've got the zip. We will unzip it here and give it the password hack the box. And we've unzipped. we now have an HTML folder, and this isn't surprising to me because whenever you have a web server, it's common you'll see var www HTML is the folder it will go in. And so if we go into that folder and take a look, in fact, we do have a bunch of PHP files. So good, right there, we know we have a PHP website. We also are going to recognize a lot of WP dash files. To me, this is immediately obvious. This is a WordPress website. WordPress is a CMS, content management system. It's incredibly common. It's fairly easy to stand up your own instance and start creating blog posts and content through the admin panel. If you didn't recognize this, what could you do? For one, there's a license here, so we can vim the license file and see right here, WordPress web processing software. That gives us a good hint what we're dealing with. Even if you didn't have that, we have all these WP files. And so if we came here and went to like WP dash, what was one of these things? Let's just pick one, WP config. If we were to throw that into a search engine, see like, oh, look, it's WordPress documentation over and over again, WordPress documentation, WP beginner, so we can figure out pretty quickly, this is a WordPress site. And a lot of hacking is taking something you're not quite sure what it is and figuring out what it is. And then you can get the resources you need to actually hack it or do forensics, etc. So we've got a WordPress website. Awesome. One of the first places I always, when I'm an attacker, when I'm hacking something, when I hack WordPress, I want to look at the plugins. The plugins can be vulnerable to something, so they can. It's often the attack surface that people use to get in. Doesn't seem like that's really the case here because we know he leaked his creds, and so we don't. Someone could just log in. But it's a place where people can go to actually get execution. So we'll go into WP content and let's take a look in here. There's a plugins folder. And inside of here, so we have got 2 directories and 2 files. Again, right now to me, I recognize these first 3 are almost always going to be there. They're standard things. But let's say you didn't know that. We can come over here, and we can say, if I can, wow, okay. WordPress, GitHub. See if we can find the source code to WordPress on GitHub. So here's this. Let's see. Repository WordPress. It just assumed I'd be able to do this. Let's see. Here, this looks like maybe this is it. WordPress. Perfect. Okay. So if we go to WordPress, WP content, plugins, and right away we can see hello.php and index.php are just there. Those are the things that come. We can compare those. They're the same as what we have. We can also start to look at, I don't even know how to say this, Akismet. And if we Google for this, we'll see it's a spam protection for websites. And let's see, the other thing, if we search for default, we can see that somewhere in here, let's see, with WordPress. Yeah, here we go. So starting with WordPress 2.0 and later, it actually ships along with WordPress. So that's a standard thing. We don't probably need to dig into it. Could the attacker have modified it some way? Sure, but let's start with this other one, Plugin Manager, because that's certainly new. So here we are in Plugin Manager, and there's 2 files. We'll take a look at plugin.php. That's just some metadata, nothing interesting there. In fact, let's open this in VS Code so we can take a look. Yes, I'll trust the authors. And let's go to Plugin Manager. And this, right away, looks very sketchy. Let's see, is it Alt-C? Yeah. So we can see, if we I'm toggling line wrap on and off, so you can see it's got quite a long line here. And basically, it's PHP code, but it's base64 decoding this blob and then evaling it. And eval just means run as PHP code. So that is sketchy, for sure. I want to decode this and see what it is, right? It's going to decode to some PHP code, I think. I could copy and paste it out of here. I like to do this on a terminal. We can cat plugin manager. We can see it here. Now we want to isolate this stuff right here. So we'll just do grep, in this case on eval, get the line that has eval. And then I'm going to use cut. And what cut's going to do, I'm going to give it a delimiter. In this case, I'm going to give it the delimiter of double quotes like that. And now, so it's going to break it here. So I want this is going to be the first field. This is going to be the second field up to this delimiter. So I'm going to say -F2 to get the second field. Now I've got just that. And now I can base64-D to decode it. And look at that. We've got PHP code. Go up here to the top. I actually this is another one that very quickly I recognize this, and I know exactly what this is. But I've been doing this a while, and I've played with things before. I'll show you how I recognize it, actually. If we go up here and we search for PHP reverse shell, I bet we can find it really quickly. Pentest monkey reverse shell, PHP reverse shell, and we can see right here, there's a bunch of comments at the top, which we didn't have. But then, look at this. It's the exact same set limit, version, IP, port, chunk size, and stuff. These exact same comments are down here. Demonize ourselves, possible to avoid zombies later. In fact, let's say you didn't know what this was. So I recognize it was a search for PHP reverse shell. If we come in here and just search for that in quotes, we're going to get that shell. We find that shell. So, that's another good hint of like strings like this. When you see things documented in strings that are like pretty unique, like this probably doesn't show up in a lot of other documents on the internet. So it's possible this shell is custom and it's not on the internet. But if it is, let's search for some of these strings and see if it comes up. So what this is a very standard PHP reverse shell. So we can do, this is going to run a PHP reverse shell. It's going to connect to this IP and port. This is useful when you're doing forensics. You're going to want to know this. If this was your company and you found this shell living in your WordPress, you'd want to then take this IP address and port and go look through your firewall logs, any kind of packet captures you have going out, any kind of net flow. You want to know who's been triggering this, what's the attacker's IP, and you want to start to pivot off of that into other data sources you have. Now, in this case, these are probably the defaults. We can actually check that. No, the default's actually 127.0.1. So it is a unique new IP address, but default port 444. But they also actually added an extra variable right here, part 1, and it looks like the start of our flag, HTTP, come on. Yeah, I guess come on. So we found half the flag. And that's about all I'm going to get out of here, actually. Let's see. There's not a lot else here. The rest of this just matches exactly what you'd see in here. Go to the bottom and verify. Yeah. So nothing else too exciting there. Let's go back up to where I'm in all sorts of Tmux trouble here. Okay, so we will go up. Oops, there we are. Okay, so what do we have else? There's something else interesting here to me. We already found, that we can go here and see the default folders in WordPress, right? And there's 3 folders actually: WP admin, WP content, WP includes. I've got 4 folders here, and this one might be kind of hard to see because it's like highlighted in green with blue writing on it, right? But that actually is its own marker. Why is that happening? Well, my terminal is configured, and this is kind of just a default Ubuntu terminal, but so it's very common like this. But it shows this has to do with the permissions, right? So it turns directories blue, files are left white. If I were to set something like set UID, it would turn bright red. In fact, I can show you that if we touch test, and then if we do change mod 4777 test, you can see how it turns like it's red with a white background. So we don't need that. That's just a demo. So this just has to do with the permissions. And if we do an ls-l, we can see our permissions on these other 3 directories. Oops. Whoa. Let's try that again. We'll go full screen for the sake. Our permissions on the other 3 directories here all are read, write, execute for the owner, but then the group and everybody are just read, execute. But this one is read, write, execute for everybody. Now, is that important? Nah, not really. No, it doesn't make a difference, except it makes this folder stand out as different than the others. And again, that's the trigger. Like, maybe I should check that one out. So let's see what's in there. So we can do WP blogs. And I'm just tapping through, and it's autofilling, which tells me that 2022 is the only directory in WP blogs, and 11 is the only directory in 2022. So we'll just go in there. And in here, we have index.php and styles.css. Open that up again. We can close this previous one. I don't think we need it anymore. And let's take a look at index.php. So we got a web page here. We have an index.html with some stuff going on, seat, carriage, fingerprint boarding. Might be worth viewing this to see what it looks like. And all right, now this is okay. So I was like, man, this page is finishing up quickly. This is a script, and there's this clearly obfuscated JavaScript here. In fact, take a look at it. It's got a function here. Takes these two. Now this is a function there that's defined from starting at this. And I bet you it goes all the way to the bottom. You can see, I bet you it ends right there, and then it actually calls it. So in JavaScript, you can do this thing where you say function, arg1, arg2, stuff in here, and then you can just call it right like that. So that this is going to define the function and then just immediately call it right afterwards. And it's actually doing that without. I'm not. Yeah, that looks like probably is what's happening. Well, it's also possible that it's getting picked up here because we need arguments. At the end of the day, unimportant. We got a bunch of obfuscated JavaScript here for sure. So this is definitely sketchy. Now we know from the prompt that they were using the school website or the school newspaper to send out phishing stuff. And this looks like it'd be a great, so send someone to a page on the school newspaper, and maybe that's the phishing. Maybe this is the phishing document. So we could start trying to deobfuscate this JavaScript. And in fact, we're going to probably come back and mess with it a little bit as we get at the end here. But I would rather start with, let's get a feel for what we're dealing with, right? So one thing we can do is we can actually run, if we got PHP on our VM, with a -S. And what that's going to do is say, hey, be a PHP server in this directory. It's kind of like Python -m http.server, where it starts a server in your local directory, except for this one is actually going to serve Python or PHP code, which is nice. So we need to give it a address, so we'll serve on that, and I'm just going to leave the port blank so it serves on 80. We'll do sudo so it does. Invalid address. Maybe we need to give it a port, and now it goes on 80. Oh, all right. We'll define it, put it on 80. There we go. Now we can come here and we can do 127.0.0.1, 80. Oh, not 8,000. I don't know what that is. There we go. Ooh, and we have our ticket to the Magic Express. And something else interesting happened here. So we've got a ticket to the Magic Express. That's cool. That's actually an interesting phishing thing, right? So are we trying to invite someone to come into a thing? Yeah, okay. But in the background, just on loading this page, I downloaded officialinvitation.iso. If we refresh the page, we downloaded officialinvitation1.iso. So somehow that JavaScript must be automatically downloading officialinvitation.iso. So that is interesting. Let's go check that out. So I'm going to actually close this. I don't need this anymore. We'll open up a new terminal window here. We can move download officialinvitation.iso to here. Just so I don't forget, I'm going to remove official. There we go. And if we run file on official invitation, is unsurprisingly an ISO file. An ISO is like it's technically it's a disk image. Originally was made to fill up a CD-ROM. So that's what it is. We can mount it. So we'll use the mount command. We're going to need to run as root for that. So we would give it a sudo, and not a sudo, but a sudo. Sudo mount official invitation.iso, and we'll just put it on /mount. That can take any directory. In fact, if we prefer, we could get out of here. We'll see make dir official invitation, and now we can do sudo mount official invitation.iso official invitation. And so it did mount this thing as read only, but that's fine. I don't need to mess with it. So now we can go into official invitation and look around, and we have an executable. This is not a great phishing document, to be honest with you, because I'm not sure. Maybe if I was on a Windows machine, there'd be some sort of thing that tried to download it and then run it. But if you're waiting on somebody to go into their downloads and double click on officialinvitation.iso, I'm not exactly sure what the benefit of that is. On the other hand, there is benefits to using ISOs. And one of them is that Windows has this thing called the mark of the web. And when you download something from the internet, it puts the mark of the web on the file. And that tells Windows that, like, hey, I don't trust this file as much. It came from outside, from potentially suspect places. So just be careful with it and treat it with care. If you download a ISO and then you open up that ISO and pull out officialinvitation.exe, officialinvitation.exe does not get the mark of the web. I don't know if Windows has looked into changing that. Maybe it has recently. I'm not sure. But for a long time, this was a way that attackers were bypassing mark of the web. And that's why you'll see an ISO file like this. Official invitation.exe. Let's see, we can run a file. We can run a file on it, and it is a PE 64-bit, PE 32 plus. So that means a 64-bit executable. Same thing here. 8664 is 64-bit. It's a script, meaning that we're not going to find a lot of the variable names and function names and things. It is Windows. It does not say that it's a .NET executable, so I'm not going to be able to use something like .peak or I forgot the one. Now I'm blanking on the old one I used to always love for years. ILSpy or .NET Spy or DNSpy. But I could open this up in Ghidra or something like that. Given this is an easy rated challenge, before I dive in and start doing that, I want to step back and think about what I might also look for. One thing that's very common I would want to look for is strings. So we can start with strings on official invitation.exe, and I'm expecting a fair amount, so I'm going to pipe it into less. And I think we actually found, we just found the flag. You can see parts of it looking here. Here's a pard. I'm not sure why it's part 2, but part 4. Here's part 2. It was too good to be true. That looks pretty reliable right there. In fact, we can do something a little simpler here. Let's do a grep on part 2 into less. And we get a pretty good feel here. It shows up a lot. Part 2, it was too good to be true. So that is, in fact, the end of the flag, and we could be done right now. We've got the flag. We're done. If you ever watched any of my content before or read my blogs before, you'll know one of the things I love to do is called Beyond Root. How do I got the flag. What else do I want to do? And not to go on a little rant here, but the value of these CTF challenges is not only do you get to push yourself, but this is a chance for you to experience technology set up in a way that maybe you could set this up in your own lab, but it's been done for you. So use this to learn and understand what's going on. Use this to learn how things work. So just because we got the flag, now in the middle of the competition, I got the flag, maybe I need to put it down, move on. But make yourself a note, come back to this. What are the things we could learn from this? And I've got 2 things that come to my mind. One, might be interesting to look at this EXE. Now, I actually know this EXE is a Posh C2 beacon. It's a C2 framework, Posh C2. I'm going to leave that as an assignment for the viewer. If you're feeling inspired, go open this in Ghidra, go open this in IDA, understand what it's doing. We know it's C2, so it's probably going to be doing some sort of connections back on a periodic basis to a C2 server. And it's probably going to be getting commands and executing them. Does it have, you could look at the Posh C2 website or documentation to see like, what are the commands it sends? Can you find where it takes those commands and executes them, etc.? So challenge number 1. Challenge number 2, I'm curious about that JavaScript. We kind of blew past it and we managed to not really need it, but in fact, we'll do that. We'll do a little bit of that right now. Let's see, come back here and we'll start to look at this. We'll grab this from here to here. Copy, new evil.js. Paste this in. Did I paste? Ooh, did I not like that? Okay, yeah, here we go. And now what we need to do is we really want to find every semicolon. So first of all, unword wrap. It's all one line. Ooh, do we not like? Let's see, Control F. Let's find semicolon and replace with, I always forget exactly how to do this. I think I need to, come here, let's copy that. Place with semicolon, paste. Beautiful, that works. And there's 37 of these, so we will, back here, replace, let's replace all. Beautiful, I think we got something here. So we got our function here. And a lot of this, again, it just kind of comes down to like, let's just start doing things that make sense. So this looks like a well forever. I like to do that, try var. Let's do line wrap here. I do Alt Z here to make it line wrap. This is complicated, but I'm not exactly sure what it's doing. We'll come back to that for sure. If that equals that, break. Okay. Else do that stuff. Catch. Try this. And I'm not sure how far I'm going to go in this, honestly, because I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not sure how much fun it is watching me format things, but this is actually how I approach when I get to that deobfuscating stuff. We could throw this in a beautifier, and maybe that's better. Oh, actually, the function was not that long. It was just this stuff right here. We could throw this in a beautifier, and maybe we should do that. But I actually like to do it manually, and the reason I like to do it manually is when I'm going through it manually, I actually start to get a feel for not only am I putting spacing in, but as I'm putting the spacing in, I'm starting to understand what's going on. So like now I have a very clear vision that, okay, this is the function that gets called. And look, there's another function that starts right here. So we have a second function here, and we can start to evaluate, like, what does this function actually do? It takes in these two things, and it is doing some sort of parse int on these things, some sort of math here, and we can figure that out. I'm not going to make you guys sit here and watch me put spacing in and go through this, but work through this. If you spend a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, if you start to learn how things work, it's good for you, right? You'll be better at this the more you do it. You can also take things like this. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's try it. Control, I don't know, inspect, and we'll go to the console, and we will paste it in. And of course, that's not defined. But you can, if you get the little things that are defined, you can start to do that. So you can start to say, okay, well, once I figure out what OX 4A1D D6 is, maybe I then can get the result of what parsing looks like. Well, that's just going to be, but the point of all this is you can use the browser dev console as well when you just test some JavaScript stuff. All right. I've been going on for 25 minutes. I got about 5 minutes left. I have a few thoughts that might be useful for going into a CTF event like this. So the first thing I was going to say is prepare yourself. You're watching this video, so you're already thinking about what can I do ahead of time, what can I do. If you've got a VIP subscription to Hack the Box, go look at last year's challenges. I had them up on the screen earlier. You can not only get the challenges and try them, you can get the write-ups. And so if you're real new to this and this all seems really overwhelming to you, go start reading through those write-ups and figuring out what's going on. Even if you're not new, you can look through, when you get to a challenge, there's going to be a set of tools and a set of technologies that you need to recognize and know about. Now, a lot of doing this stuff is knowing that you're going to run into stuff you don't know and you have to figure out how to search for it. I often tell people my main job is knowing how to Google things. But if you run into an Office macro, you're probably going to run into an Office macro. And if you do, I say that with no knowledge of what the challenges are, but they've been one in the last many CTFs. If you do, knowing that OLE VBA exists is really useful. It's a great tool for dumping Office macros out on Linux and looking at them. But how are you going to know that? Well, you could spend some time Googling around how to reverse engineer Office macros. But if you spend the time now looking through previous write-ups, you will see that tool in use and you can add it to your tool belt. And then when you see an Office macro this year, you just go, Office macro, I'm going to use OLE VBA. Similarly, are you going to need a Windows VM? For some forensics things, for some, I guess that forensics is probably the main category, but some things you're just going to need Windows to do it. Do you have a Windows VM ready? If you don't have a Windows VM, does someone on your team have a Windows VM? Should you go create a Windows VM right now? You could do it. It doesn't take that long. Go download an ISO from Microsoft and build yourself a VM. You don't have to activate it right now. You can use it for the event. So there are things you can do to prepare. It's worth doing. Next piece of advice. Always read the prompt. I am super guilty of not following this advice, and it has bitten me so many times. The prompt is useful. The prompt is the information the challenge creators want you to have. And there's hints in there, there's clues in there, not always, but often. My gut instinct when I get a challenge is how quickly can I skim through this and figure out what I need to know so I can go get to the actual file they gave me or go get to the thing I'm trying to hack. Resist that urge. Read the prompt. Think about the words. Knowing in this, in the fake news challenge, knowing that we are looking for a phishing site is useful information, and it'll help us guide how we approach the problem. If you're stuck, take a break. You have this feeling, especially when you're racing or you're in an event, where if I stop, I'm going to fall behind. But really, when you've been going through digging into rabbit holes over and over again, if you can walk away for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, I don't take a walk, go think about something that's not hacking. When you come back and sit down and approach something new, your mind's going to go, oh, wait, did you think about this? Like you're going to get new insights that you wouldn't if you were just forcing yourself down the same paths over and over again. So breaks can be incredibly valuable. Use them, make yourself take them. And then finally, use your team, ask questions, talk to each other. Even if you don't have a team, if you're by yourself, you can still practice the art of asking a good question. And by asking a good question, what I mean is, you're going to explain to somebody who is as smart as you or smarter than you, the challenge you're running into. You want to give them all the information. You want to show them that you don't want to show them and be like, hey, I looked at this for 30 seconds. I don't know what to do. What do I do? Like, that's not a good question. But if you can go to them and say like, hey, so I've got this directory of files and I think it's a WordPress directory because it's all these WP files, right? So it looks like WordPress to me. And I found a plugin and the plugin, it looks like a PHP or reverse shell and I found a flag. But then I can't figure out, there's got to be more because there's only half the flag. And I can't really figure out where else to look. And these are the things I've tried, but it hasn't worked. And I've gone through the source code on GitHub to see the default plugins. And I haven't, maybe I could use that to look for what the default folders are in the root. And the point of that little exercise is a lot of times if you make yourself type things out, you make yourself ask a really detailed question saying everything you've tried so far and where you plan to go next and where you failed and where you hit walls, you'll catch yourself and you'll say, well, I didn't actually do this. Maybe I should go do this. I regularly get in the habit of when I get stuck trying to solve something, pulling up a friend on Discord and just, even if I have no plans on asking, if I know they're not around, start pretending to ask the question. And by the time I get through typing out the question, usually like 3 out of 4 times, I have found myself going, oh, I haven't tried this. I better go try that first. And don't even send the question. I can just then go try things. But having to frame things, I call this rubber duck debugging. It's a technique programmers use, but it works in hacking too. And it can just be so valuable. So, yeah, I think those are my tips. I hope you all have fun this year and learn something. And yeah, thanks for participating and thanks for hanging with me today. And yeah, I'll talk to you next time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, ZeroXDF, for that awesome talk. Again, all these talks are going to be up on YouTube later today, so keep an eye out for that. If you've missed any of these, definitely check that out. They'll all be up there. Sometimes the talks even make it over to Spotify, just depending on the content involved. A lot of our AMAs actually make it over to Spotify for that reason. With that in mind, we're going to go ahead and move on to our final talk of the day. Last but certainly not least, we have Going Beyond Root for Fun and Foundations by IPSec. If you're not familiar with IPSec, definitely check out his write-ups. And if you're not familiar with him, I may ask, have you done any Hack the Box before? Because if not, you may not have used one of his write-ups. But I digress. Awesome talk. Very awesome speaker. I'm very excited. In this talk is really going to demonstrate the ability and importance of going beyond just rooting a machine. So with that being said, let's go ahead and I'll hand it over to Ip for Going Beyond Root for Fun and Foundations.
What is going on, everyone? This is IPSec, and I hope you've been enjoying the Hack the Box University CTF 2023 talks. This is going to be the final talk. It is titled Going Beyond Root for Fun and Foundations. I guess there's fun and profit as well. This is definitely something you can make a career out of, but if you go for the profit, it's probably not going to be as fun. You really should just focus on the fun and foundations, and this talk's going to be about how to do that, right? And if you don't know what Beyond Root is, it's kind of a term me and OXDF have coined that says when you do a challenge, you get root, you get the flag, that's only like halfway done with the challenge. There's so much more you can do to explore that, right? That is the Beyond Root. And it's so important to do this, especially if you didn't like the challenge, because you don't want to end on a negative, because every time you end on that negative, there's a less chance you come back to it. It's horrible for motivation, right? So an example, a long time ago, port knocking was super big in these type of challenges. And I hated that. That's just, you send 3 magic packets and a 4th port opens up. and you get access to our service. So a beyond root would be you find a file disclosure and then you start looking at the file system. You could just look at etsy.nocd.conf and chances are you'd find the configuration there, but I hate targeting the recon that way. I poked a lot around the /proc system and discovered I could like brute force running processes by going to like /proc / the PID like 1 /CMD line and just go through 1 through 1,000. I also found like there's a file in proc called sketch_debug that lists some running services that you could get it from. And then the challenge became much better. I didn't like the port knocking aspect, but I recognized it taught me something valuable in the recon game, and I came away from that with a positive experience. So that is going to be the emphasis of this talk and convincing you to try to give like my way of learning a try, I guess. So let's look at the agenda, right? We're going to do the introduction. Who I am? Well, I'm IPSEC. I do a lot of videos. You probably found me on YouTube. I am a training lab architect at Hack the Box. I still don't know what my responsibilities are. I float around all the departments, sometimes help out create content, help like test the machines, do things. I float around all the departments and just try to bring value, right? So this talk, we're going to have 3 main things we talk about: self-paced learning issues, setting goals too high or unrealistic. We talked about not setting them for money. The overdependence on course or just one type of learning, right? If you just learn through playing dedicated labs and just doing black box challenges, it's also not efficient. You want to mix things up and learn different ways. And as you learn, you want to make sure you relate things in your mind and build some type of internal map so you have better recall and memorization. Or memorization is a bad word. Just you have better recall and just foundations. Then we're going to go on and focus on the primitives, which could also be foundations. That just shows like how we can keep things simple, how we understand exploits when we don't understand everything, and just the value of learning how to do troubleshooting. And then at the end, we're going to wrap it up by saying, make all the mistakes, because every mistake is a learning opportunity. I learn more from my failures than my successes. So whenever I make a mistake, I'm happy about it and try changing that mindset. So obviously, opinions ahead. This may not work for you. It works for me. Chances are everything I say won't work for you. So just take and leave what you want, right? So let's get into it. Why this talk? Well, cybersecurity is all about learning curves. Everything's going to seem impossible until it isn't. Learning how to train can ease the pain. The pain's never going to go away, but as long as you have realistic expectations and you know how to do foundational things, I think you're going to succeed. A bad example of a goal or a bad goal would be you're doing the CTF this weekend and you want to be like a top 5 finisher. I say that's a bad goal because realistically, the top 5 is a very small percent. There's a good chance you won't meet that goal. You should just say, I'm going to complete a few challenges, or I'm going to mark down all the new things I've learned, all the new technologies I got acquainted with. At the end of the CTF, even if you don't place well, you'll be surprised by all the new things that you are acquainted with, right? So that's going to be the goal of this talk, is just kind of teaching you how to consume this content, because this is self-paced learning. We don't have a manager or teacher telling us exactly what to learn, which is good because there's guides on absolutely everything. If I wanted to pivot away from InfoSec and try to fix my car, I can probably find a guide on YouTube exactly to like the model of car and fixing the problem I have, right? If I don't want to do video content, I can probably find a Medium blog or website that has it in text format, right? And if I don't want to do text or YouTube, I can easily socialize. There's probably a Discord community around what I want. The Hack the Box Discord is definitely great. And then with self-paced learning, it's easy to prove you have that knowledge with certificates, right? But with all good does come bad things. And it's important to recognize the pitfalls so you can avoid them, right? There's guides on absolutely everything, which kind of puts you in this weird limbo state of tutorial hell where you spend more time trying to start to learn than actually starting, right? You want to find the most optimal way, the most optimal course to learn that thing. And you'll spend like an hour or two trying to find a good path, then get demotivated, stop, play a game, and then come back to it multiple days later, and you'll just be where you started. Where if you just started right away, acknowledging this may not be the most optimal, but we're going to see how it goes, you'd be in a better spot, right? The other thing is a lot of courses, videos will focus on hype or clickbait, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? But if you just say, I'm going to learn all these SQL payloads, but don't have the foundational knowledge of how to use SQL, you're not going to be that successful, right? A lot of the videos like showing the full complete thing instead of all the troubleshooting and just foundational things that go into it. So that can be a problem. Also, most courses are designed to work. So again, you're not going to have a lot of troubleshooting research, things like that. Like it's going to give you this exact flow of how you're supposed to do, some commands to copy and paste, and you won't be able to make typos because you copy and pasted. So the courses are designed to work. If you don't go outside of that course and apply your knowledge and think about other things, you're not going to do a great job building your foundation, right? Also, because it's so easily to socialize, it's so easy to be negative. In video games, I came across like more pew pew, less QQ. And what that means is if the game is giving you something that's frustrating, you think it's unfair, it's easy for you to dismiss that and just say the game is bad, other than saying, oh, I understand the problem. This is how I'm going to tackle it. I know it's not a great situation, but I can overcome it, right? You want to spend more time doing, less time complaining. And if you just socialize a lot, it's easy to get into this like negative feedback loop where you spend so much time complaining, you don't ever do work or don't do as much work as you should. And then the last thing is like if you try to collect all the certs and just like study for the exam, try to find how to pass this exam instead of just learning the material, it becomes more about consuming than enjoyment. And when that happens, you're not really enjoying the material. A good example of this, because I like relating everything to other things, right? That's how I think learning is best. So there was a discussion on Mistborn subreddit. If you don't know what Mistborn is, it's just a fantasy novel by Brandon Sanderson. And someone was complaining about a lot of things that they just didn't get. And it came to fruition that they were listening to it on Audible at 2.5 times the speed because they wanted to get through of it. And it was like, you're just consuming the book. Like, why'd you pay for it? You should enjoy it. It's like 20 hours for this book and you consumed it in 8 hours. Of course, you don't have a full understanding, right? So don't speed through it. Don't make it a game of collect them all. Just make sure your goals are realistic. Don't go for like 6 certs in a year. Make it like 2, right? Because at that level, you can actually enjoy what you are learning instead of just trying to get all the titles. So self-paced learning, you can become over-dependent on it. Courses are great. They teach a lot, but they don't build endurance or stamina, right? Like I said before, not everything's going to work out of the box. If all you're used to is things working, when it doesn't work, you give up and you say it's not a vulnerability or you move on, when it may have just been a simple typo or it was configured slightly different, right? It's really hard to teach people good troubleshooting and research. That's what makes a good engineer. That's where experience definitely helps. So you want to make sure you always are trying to build on that type of skill in the troubleshooting research. And also, it's hard to multitask in a course because it's going to give you an exact path that you go down and you just go down that path. You're not running tools in the background to get more information, right? And that definitely helps when you come to test a lot of apps and just know when to move on from a rabbit hole, right? I'm looking at this field. I think it's a server-side template injection. I spent 30 minutes on it. And if I wasn't running recon in the background, I don't really ever not focus on that SSTI that I think it is. Whereas if I was running recon in the background, I may discover a new host, a new technology, a new something that catches my interest. I can move on from that. Maybe it wasn't exploitable. Maybe it was. I'll come back to it when I have some more knowledge of the web app, and maybe that fills a missing hole, right? So those 3 things are very important: troubleshooting, research, and multitasking. And if you have all those, that'll help you build strong foundations, because memorization and flowcharts is not going to be enough for this field. Too many times I see people say, I'm going to run this tool. It's going to say do this or give me this information, which then I'm going to run it to this tool. It's going to say this and this and this and this. And you just kind of build this big flowchart of just things to do. It's hard to keep that maintained. At least it is for me. Maybe that's just not how I work. I think people do that, though, because there's an unrealistic expectation of knowing everything in this field. And to the untrained eye, it looks like everyone here is a jack of all trades, master of everything, right? If you watch my videos, there's a good chance I come across that way. But most of the time, I'm learning as I go. Like in a video, even if it's an easy box, there's a good chance I learned something while recording or 24 hours before recording. And if that box was insane, there's probably a 25% chance within 48 hours of recording the video, I wanted to give up because I just did not think I was going to get the material in a way I could explain it, right? So definitely just try to focus on foundations because it helps you learn things, right? Before we go into like a tech topic, let's talk about like driving, I guess. If I wanted to drive to the community college by me, I don't know all the turns to make off the top of my head. I don't know like any street names outside of where I live. But as I'm driving, I get more sensory input from just the place around me, and I can remember all the turns to make when I get close to that turn, right? And that's why I value building a foundation, because I'm not going to understand all the exploits. I don't understand every programming language, but I start relating them to things I do understand, and it makes it look like I know what I'm doing, right? So earlier in this talk, OXDF talked about a phishing challenge, and it started with a phishing payload that was an ISO file. But let's just draw this, and this is going to be a treasure map. I'm going to put an X here, and this is going to be the payload, right? If we forgot that, we're just left with the treasure map. We don't have any way to help us get back to where we were, right? But if this was a ISO file and we're doing the forensic investigation, we could just go straight to the executable, do analysis there, and move on, right? There's a lot of questions it probably didn't ask us. And whenever I do this, I would relate it to things like, why is the attacker sending an ISO? That's probably a mark of the web thing. Mark of the web, if you don't know, it's like a bit that gets sent on files that get downloaded from the internet that just tells the operating system it came from the internet and it doesn't trust it. But if a Word document isn't an ISO, there's a chance that the Word document didn't get that mark of the web because the system didn't flip that bit there. It just flipped it on the ISO. So when they open it up, a macro may execute, right? So that's one potential thing. Another thing they could do it for is, let's say, some type of filtering, right? They're filtering executables on web, so you can't send them anything. And yes, my handwriting here is horrible, trying a new thing. But there's some type of filtering in play. So the ISO may let them get an executable to the user's workstation. Also, upon filtering, there could be a policy. And by policy, I mean maybe the workstation won't execute files out of downloads. But because it was an ISO file, it mounted as, like, let's say the D drive. They click the executable. The system no longer thinks it's in downloads because it's in D, and then it runs, right? I'm building all these connections, thinking about it, trying to think about more when I read other people's write-ups. That's what I'm trying to find out, if they said anything I didn't know about the ISO, because a few weeks down the line, I am going to forget that it came from an ISO, but now my treasure map still has things, right? I'm thinking about it, mark of the web, filtering, probably was an ISO. It could have been a zip, but zip probably won't bypass some type of policy. So now I'm just remembering all these things and remembering this chain, right? Let's say, let's get away from the forensic aspect. I'm just trying to erase everything here. And let's go with a, I don't know, we'll talk about a PHP exploit, right? It was a SSTI that we did, server-side template injection. So we'll put SSTI here. That is horrible, but we'll go with it. And when I'm thinking about this, I don't know much about PHP SSTI, but I know it's a template. I know a lot of Python, and I know Jinja 2 pretty well, right? So I can relate it to that. And when I Google, I can Google for Python things, translate it to PHP, because PHP SSTI, it's probably going to be Blade, right? I think that's a language. And if I can remember these things, when I'm having trouble doing something, I now can Google, this is how I would do it in Jinja 2. How do I do it in Blade? I don't Google the exploit. I just Google the foundational technologies it's built upon, and then find someone explaining it and filling in the gaps, right? So again, I just try to go through this. Another thing we go with SSTI, I would think fuzzing parameters, right? We send 2 squiggly brackets to the server, it vomits. That tells me it's SSTI, because I could be thinking PHP, SQL, and we go with a single quote, right? I'm just trying to build all these relations. And when I see it behaves oddly to 2 double brackets, I'm going to SSTI, right? I'm not trying to build a flow chart of run this tool, see this, do this, do this. I'm just trying to build it upon a lot of technologies, relating it. So when I see something, my brain tries to draw a map back to what it is. Hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully I don't become into like this guy, right? Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I just want to include that meme here. So I do think the foundations, trying to link things definitely helps with recalling. And when you run into a problem, you know more about what to Google to get out of that problem. So the other thing that helps is exploit primitives. Maybe this is foundations, maybe primitive is a bad word, but very rarely is an exploit or technology really fully unique, right? Everything relates to something somehow. Uber relates to taxi drivers, right? It's just a different way of hailing the taxi. So I always try to break any type of exploit or technology into as many pieces as I can understand. For example, privilege escalations love elevated file rates. It's not always going to be the case, but I like knowing all the ways as an admin user, if I write a file, I can get code execution, right? In Windows, that's like writing a DLL to C:\Windows System 32. Linux, it could be like writing an SSH key, a cron job, things like that, because a lot of the exploits are based around tricking a program that's running as admin to write a file. And as a defender, if I can just detect that file right, then I can potentially detect exploits I don't know about, right? Someone just tricked my Cisco VPN client to write a config, which was a DLL to C:\System 32. I don't have a lot of monitoring around Cisco VPN, but I do have monitoring around my System 32 directory, so I can discover that ODay without actually knowing the exploit. That's what people mean by saying detect the technique, not the exploit or the tool. Another thing is like deserialization. All these exploits look complicated. I've exploited a lot of Java applications, and I don't fully understand the whole attack chain, right? I just know how to detect it and how to build a payload. I don't know what that payload actually is. I just feed it to YSO serial. It gives me something. I build an exploit script. It looks like I know what I'm doing, but really, it's a lot of copy and pasting code, right? When it comes to binary exploitation challenges, a lot of it just really revolves to getting to a known state. I'm not good at solving Rubik's Cubes, but I'm told that a lot of people don't have every pattern memorized. They just know how to get the Rubik's Cube into a state, and then from that state, they know how to solve it, right? They're trying to get a color to a certain spot because if they do, they know how to move it and solve the cube, right? It's just playing around with it, getting it to a state you know, so you can exploit it. Earlier in this talk, I think it was Zayed, the advanced web exploitation, or this conference, not this talk, but a few hours ago, Zayed talked about like doing command injection and leaking the results one character at a time blindly, right? And that was something that was somewhat new to me. I've never really done that on a shell command, but I related it to an SQL database and fully understand what was happening, right? If you don't know, let's say we can do a giant if-then statement on a specific character, right? We're running this command. It gives us a string. We just say, give us the first character and then ask it questions. If the letter was H, of course, we could just brute force and say, is it A, is it B, is it C, is it D, is it E, right? And just go through the list until it's H and move on. But that's not really efficient. A lot of the applications will either take two approaches. The first I call divide and conquer. I don't know if it's correct. Some people call it binary search, but I don't think it exactly is. And that is just doing a lot of characters at once and asking questions, right? So in this, we convert the H to a character or a number, and then just ask, is it something, right? So we have the alphabet. We know it's going to be alpha, like a character. It's A through Z. So we're going to go halfway through the alphabet and say, is this before M? The application says, yes, it is before M. So now we know, okay, it is A through M. Is it? And halfway between A through M is probably F. So we go, is it before F? The application goes, no. So we go, okay, great. It is between now F and M. J is halfway between there. We ask it, is it before J? It says yes. Again, we're just eliminating half and moving on. We say, is it before H? Because at this point, it's only, I think, HFG or something. There's, I think, 3 at this point. Is it before H? No. Is it after G? Yes. And once we get to the G, there's only 2 things it could be. It's either G or H. And if it says after G, we know it was H. So we just took the results, asked it divided them halfway every time until we got to just 1. That's a lot quicker way than going through the entire alphabet. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. Another approach that I kind of just learned, I don't use this that much, but I was talking to someone, they said bit shift. I looked at the code, I couldn't understand it. And then I started relating it to what I knew, which was the divide and conquer, and I understood it, right? So instead of converting H to like its decimal form that lets us do the is it before thing and dividing every time, we convert it to binary, which is always going to be 8 bits, right? And then we go through each bit at a time, right? So we're saying, is the first bit 1? No? Okay, we know the bit 0. Is the second bit 1? Yes, we know this bit is 1. Is the third bit 1? No, it's 0. And after asking 8 questions, we know what that byte is, and we convert that byte over to a character. It's a really efficient way to brute force this one character at a time without going over the whole key space, right? And I say this because there are definitely times when one approach won't work. Maybe there's a web filter in place and your exploit script just doesn't work. So you have to know how to shift it, right, over to the other way. Or just go completely inefficient and one character at a time. But again, most SQL injection things that do binary or Boolean based will go one of these two patterns. And just knowing these definitely does help when you do other programming challenges. And I'm sure you can relate this to other things now that you know it. So definitely make all the mistakes, right? I didn't know bit shift. I just went and played with it. Eventually I learned it. If you don't make the mistakes, and yes, I know there's a typo in the title. I typoed that and I was like, you know what? It kind of goes with the slide, right? You just try to be the jack of all trades and you won't be the master of anything. Or you won't even be a jack of all trades. You'll just be a master of nothing. You'll be okay, or maybe a junior, right? But if you make the mistakes, you explore things, you learn, I think you easily become a jack of all trades, master of one. And I think this is the best thing. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like this whole jack of all trades thing, but think of it this way. Like, if I just focus on Python, only do Python things, I refuse to look at any other language, I'll never know what other languages do better. And that definitely helps me write better Python code, right? Before I started looking at Golang is big in error handling because you got a lot of if error equals nil type of things, right? But before I ever coded a Golang program, my Python error handling was horrible. I started with Go. I learned how to do error handling a little bit better. Then I looked at the Python way to do it with a lot of try catch and started getting better at Python, right? You want to try to experiment, try other things out, relate it to what you know, and it'll help you master the one thing you do know. And that one thing you do know, you'll be able to relate it to everything else, and things will just come to you naturally, right? That's building the foundation. So with that being said, hopefully this wasn't too rambly and you enjoyed the talk. Thank you, and have a good rest of the day, I guess.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that awesome talk, Ip. That is going to do it for our talks today, but that's by no means is at the end of the university CTF. In fact, the CTF itself proper is starting tomorrow. You can still register for that. Again, you need to have a valid university email. I'm going to link that here. Additionally, all of these talks, in case you missed one of these, you can see the full schedule on that link, but all those talks, the recordings are going to be up on YouTube here in just a little while. So keep an eye on that. Those will be on the Hack the Box YouTube channel. That being said, like I mentioned before, the University CTF is running from the 8th through the 10th. On the 11th, we are going to hold an after party, which is super cool. The CTF after party. So maybe you're not able to compete in this. Maybe you're not a university student. That's okay. There's still plenty of other fun stuff to do. The after party is going to be a party where we can talk about all the challenges. All the write-ups are going to be posted. It's a way that we're actually able to break that down and have a day of collaboration after the competition. One other thing to mention, I said that there's plenty of other things to do. If you are not a university student and not able to participate in the university CTF, don't forget that there are plenty of older challenges from our past university CTFs and our other CTFs on the main platform. There's also plenty of similar content on our academy. A lot of this is free, so go check it out. But otherwise, I think that about does it for the stream. If you have any questions, feel free to toss them in chat. Otherwise, be sure to join our Discord. I linked that a little bit higher up in chat. Our Discord is also linked off of I believe, our YouTube channel, and it's also linked off of our main website. So, like I said, I think that's going to be about it for the stream. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. And until next time, happy hacking.